Hi, if you want to watch exclusive content with hot girls that you won't watch on YouTube, namely where Naruto roasts Kushina and Mikoto and many other hot girls without restrictions, then visit my Boosty channel at the link in the description. You wanted to see me, Hokage-sama? The copy ninja of the Hidden Leaf Village, Hatake Kakashi, stood at the threshold of the fifth's office. Yes, Tsunade replied, not looking up from a scroll on the table. How's the deciphering of the note going? Shikamaru and Naruto are working on it right now. They seem to have found the code. Good, the Hokage suddenly interrupted him. A new problem has arisen, the woman paused, after which she finally raised her gaze to her subordinate, and this gaze was focused and sharp. You remember that a couple of days ago, when we had just received news of Jiraiya's death, Konoha received a request from one of our regular and respected clients for an experienced combat medic? And you sent Sakura? Kakashi continued cautiously for the fifth. Exactly. And this, Tsunade lifted the ill-fated scroll with one hand and handed it to the Jounin, arrived this morning. The copyist took a few steps towards the Hokage's desk and picked up the open letter. A simple, small, narrow tube with strings without any distinguishing marks, slightly worn, most likely not new, judging by the yellowed parchment on which the ink was brightly blackened, which spoke of the freshness of the letter itself. The calligraphically clear hieroglyphs formed the following words. In 4 days, at the Valley of Fulfillment, I will exchange Haruno Sakura for Uzumaki Naruto. If he does not come, Haruno will die. If there is anyone else with him, Haruno will also die. Uchiha Sasuke. With whom was it delivered? Hatake did not need a signature at the end of the note. He immediately recognized the handwriting of his student who had left the village. An ordinary hawk, not even a postal hawk. Tsunade leaned back in her chair. How could he deliver this message here? The Sharingan can easily control the minds of animals. The Jounin replied and continued. The question is, to what extent is what is written in this letter true? Tsunade looked at Kakashi carefully, thinking about something intently. The silence dragged on. If Sakura doesn't come back in 2 days, she finally began slowly. We must tell Naruto everything. The copy one finished. 2 days later, Haruno Sakura still hadn't appeared in the Hidden Leaf Village. The girl stretched in an attempt to drive away sleep. Her mission had ended this morning, when a wealthy merchant, who was also a regular customer of Konoha, had finally arrived home from the Land of Fire with a small but very valuable, according to him, baggage. Sakura had no idea what was in the baggage, but as a ninja she was needed to guard it. The merchant needed her as a medic, as he had no opportunity to boast of excellent health in addition to luxurious and expensive goods. The mission itself had gone without a hitch. No one had attempted to rob the foreign investor, and, having handed over the object and subject of the task to a caring family, Haruno had immediately headed back to the Land of Fire. It was too inopportune for her to be isolated from all the events and news of Konoha. Had Jiraiya-sama's message been deciphered? What were the results of the autopsy of the body, the supposed body? One of the bodies? Pain? Was Naruto able to cope with the news of his sensei's death? All these questions made the girl hurry, but 2 sleepless nights next to the luggage that had to be guarded and the merchant, whose health had to be constantly monitored, made themselves felt. The body demanded rest, tempting the tempting idea of resting and sleeping off at the nearest inn or even somewhere in a secluded corner of the forest surrounding the girl. Perhaps that is why Sakura, busy with her thoughts and struggling with fatigue, did not immediately notice the man sitting on a large stone by the road. Only after coming to a distance of 10 steps, she finally paid attention to him. And when she realized who was in front of her, she involuntarily slowed down her pace, and then stopped altogether. Sasuke Uchiha sat on a rock, resting his elbows on his knees and not taking his piercing but absolutely impenetrable gaze off Sakura. This was their second meeting after almost 3 years since he left Konoha. Then, in Orochimaru's lair, the kunoichi could not hide her amazement, and she could not hide it now, although it was caused not so much by the person of the Uchiha himself, but by the fact of the meeting. The girl even wanted to pinch herself to make sure that she had not fallen asleep from fatigue right on the go. The staring contest lasted no more than a couple of seconds, after which Sasuke stood up and looked at the kunoichi again. This time from top to bottom the Uchiha was almost a head taller than Sakura, which was very consistent with his appearance as a whole. There was no trace left of the usual detachment and pronounced self-sufficiency. In their place stepped a dark aura-breathing November cold and terrifying power, stopping in advance any attempts of those around him to stupid and careless words or actions. And he was still as dazzlingly handsome, simultaneously pushing away and attracting those very people around him. My throat felt strangely dry, and my heart began to skip a beat every other time, causing something to immediately clench in my chest. As Sasuke-kun? Haruno said hesitantly, still not daring to believe her eyes. As you see, a simple answer, just in the style of the Uchiha. But! An incomprehensible lump rose in my throat, preventing me from speaking. I remember 3 years ago you wanted me to take you with me, and you were ready to do whatever I said. Sasuke took a step towards the girl, thereby reducing the distance between them to a meter. Sakura couldn't answer, not even understanding what her former partner was getting at. Still want to join? Her heart sank somewhere, the lump in her throat jumped up but stayed in place, and for a moment the girl forgot to breathe at all. But Sasuke clearly had no intention of continuing, having obviously already asked the main question of this meeting, and only continued to look intently at Sakura. I don't, and she couldn't say anything again. It was too unexpected, too inopportune, and too unrealistic to receive such an offer from him. Previously, Sakura wouldn't have hesitated for a second, but now. And the old feelings, no matter how you look at it, had managed to cool down. The new Sasuke was an attractive, but threatening secret for Sakura. However, Uchiha didn't give her time to choose. Then let's go. After these simple words that decided everything for the girl, the guy turned around and walked straight down the road. As always, he doesn't listen to anyone but himself, someone said provocatively and brazenly behind the stunned Kunoichi. Turning around, Sakura saw 3 people standing a few meters away from her. The white-haired guy, who apparently had said the last line, with the handle of a sword that was apparently quite large visible from behind his back, was smiling unpleasantly with his sharp-toothed shark-like mouth and was not taking his insolent, steadying gaze off Haruno. The red-haired girl in glasses standing next to him, about the same age as Sakura, was measuring the kunoichi with a defiant and extremely hostile look, her whole appearance exuding disgust and indignation for reasons that were still unclear to Haruno. The third was a tall man, even taller than Sasuke, a powerfully built man who in turn showed no interest in either Sakura or the situation as a whole. Even now, he was looking somewhere to the side and up, clearly thinking about something of his own. The first to step towards Sakura, or rather, just following Sasuke, was a white-haired guy. Let's get acquainted. Soijetsu, he introduced himself, coming closer. His smile was not so much unpleasant in its impudence as in its shark-like grin, which did not make Sakura shudder only because, studying medicine with Tsunade, she had seen much more. The red-haired beast is called Karen, the tall silent one is Yugo. Well, doll, he said syllable by syllable, as if savoring each part separately, shall we go? And he also headed forward along the road after the Uchiha, who had already moved a decent distance away. Yugo, introduced to Sakura, was already calmly following him. The red-haired beast, snorting at the nickname given to Haruno Soijetsu, measured Sakura with another withering look and also followed her partners. The kunoichi stood there completely at a loss, not knowing, not imagining, not guessing what she should, could, would like to say, do, think in this situation. She absent-mindedly looked at the passing ninja, apparently former followers of Orochimaru, and could not even move. At some point, watching their backs, she encountered the expectant and surprisingly calm gaze of the Uchiha. He did not call. He did not invite. He did not reject. He simply waited for her decision. Perhaps that was why, because of that look, Sakura was able to take the first step. The first step after them. The first step after Uchiha Sasuke. The first step towards the abyss. The kunoichi caught up with the Taka 4 quickly, though still unsure of the correctness of her decision. However, she could change it at any moment, couldn't she? She could. No, she should have understood, tried to understand. To find out? Uchiha Sasuke and his goals. After that, she could either stay or leave. Right. They walked, it would be wrong to say, in complete silence. Soijetsu would occasionally make some caustic remarks or jokes, to which Karen would react in an ambiguously violent manner and, as her partners could notice, more irritated and expressive than usual, which, in fact, the swordsman took advantage of. By the way, when Sakura, again not believing her eyes, recognized Suigetsu's cold weapon as Zabuza's sword, the guide dispelled all her doubts about its authenticity, allowing the girl to believe in the possibility of the impossible for the umpteenth time that day. Suigetsu managed to draw even the silent Yugo into conversation from time to time. Only Uchiha Sasuke, constantly leading their procession, remained calm and cold as the first autumn ice. Having missed several forks, at one of which Sakura would have to turn in order to get to the hidden leaf by the beaten and direct path, they moved further and further along the foreign land. The terrain slowly and steadily rose above sea level, indicating that they were already walking along the foot of the first of a whole chain of mountains that had become a natural border with the land of fire. Evening was already approaching, and Sakura still did not know how to talk to Sasuke. And was it even necessary to talk? He did exactly what she asked him to do back then. But why only now? Absorbed in new concerns, Haruno forgot to think about Konoha, Naruto, Tsunade, Kakashi-sensei, about what had worried her just a few hours ago. And it seemed like so long ago. Only when it began to get dark did they approach a small inn at one of the crossroads of trade routes, not large enough to build a full-fledged hotel, but quite capable of feeding the owners and a staff of servants. The latter, or rather two short, dark-haired and surprisingly similar girls in dark azure kimonos, greeted the guests at the threshold with a traditional bow. 3 rooms and 5 futons. Sasuke politely but coldly informed the woman, dressed in the same clothes as the girls. As you wish, she answered with a bow. Please follow me. She glided silently and smoothly along the only, but long corridor with several branches, stepping softly on the dark wooden floor, and the shinobi followed her. The girls bring breakfast after you wake up. Lunch and dinner are in the common room. You can also visit our hot springs. Her voice was as smooth and measured as her gait. The narrowed hem of her kimono rustled barely audibly, and the pendant on sticks supporting a neat bun of hair barely swayed. Having reached the end of the corridor, the woman stopped, moved aside the partition made of rice paper, turned to the guests and bowed again. Please make yourself at home. The futons will be brought a little later. Her pleasant voice caught up with the company when they had already entered the room. Thank you very much. Sakura, who entered last, said with a smile and thanked everyone on their behalf. The large room with its scrupulously washed wooden floors, several neat lamps hanging from thick, criss-cross beams under the ceiling, external and 2 internal partitions made of rice paper. Built-in wardrobes, all this was done in a traditional, sober style, in a combination of dark and light shades of brown. Karen, you take the far room, Yugo, Suigetsu the next one. As always, Sasuke did not waste his energy on unnecessary words. But Karen began in a raised voice, but then suddenly and offendedly fell silent, catching Sasuke's cold gaze. You're unlucky, the doll's lucky, Suigetsu said, smiling cheekily as always, not caring too much about his words. What do you mean? Tell. Sakura did not finish, because she suddenly realized that in his distribution of places, Uchiha did not name 2 people, her and himself. And that meant that they would remain in this part of the room and would be fenced off from the rest by, albeit thin, but still existing walls. Together. Almost alone. Her heart sank somewhere down again. Karen, pursing her lips and lifting her sharp nose, quickly and noisily walked to the far part of the room and loudly slammed the doors. Oh, these women! The swordsman said, clearly enjoying himself, and throwing his hands behind his head, walked into his unit. Yugo, as always, silently followed him. Bye! Suigetsu sang, closing the doors. Immediately after that, a light flashed behind them. They were left alone, illuminated by the soft halftone from the lamps in the next room. Uchiha walked up to the opposite door and pulled one open. Behind it was a spacious courtyard with a small decorative stream, a wooden bridge over it, stones, neatly trimmed grass and several trees, most likely plum trees. Sasuke, the voice again treacherously left the girl, while the guy slightly turned his head to the side, expressing his readiness to listen to her. Aye, and again the damn lump in the throat. If you don't want to tell me anything useful, he began calmly. No. Wait, and she was confused again, but quickly found something to say. What are your goals? A direct question. 3 years ago, You did not need me in any capacity, and now you, and again fell silent, lowering her head and helplessly clenching her fists, just like then. Memories flooded in one wave, like a paper boat, sweeping away the wall of self-confidence built over the years, flooding her consciousness, stirring up old, seemingly licked, but buzzing again wounds. Uchiha closed the door, walked past Sakura with an even step and, pushing aside the paper partition leading to the corridor, and also slightly turning his head towards the girl, said, "I'll be at the springs. They'll bring futons soon. You can go to bed. You look awful." Sakura turned around sharply and for the umpteenth time that day, not really trusting her senses and somehow childishly, slightly opening her mouth, looked at her interlocutor. Uchiha had already left, but her decisive question caught up with him. "Goals, Sasuke-kun?" After freezing for a second, Uchiha still answered, this time, however, without turning around, so that Haruno could only see his back and the back of his head and hear words that shocked her even more. "You shouldn't care. Just be with me." The thin shutter fell into place. Sakura slowly sank to the floor, feeling a strange weakness in her knees. And finally, "I did what I had been wanting to do all day. I pinched my arm hard." "Ouch," she blurted out involuntarily, but the pain brought her to her senses, returning the desired feeling of reality. The reality of what was happening. The reality of what she had heard. Although the girl would rather believe that she had been asleep a few moments ago than that Sasuke had actually said what he had said. But the surroundings, the dim light, and Sujetsu's cheerful voice behind the partition indicated that everything was really happening in reality. Her heart began to beat unsurprisingly fast. Haruno felt the color rush to her cheekbones and it became stuffy. Just like then. When she was embarrassed every time he addressed her or even just accidentally glanced at her. When she watched herself, her actions, her words every moment. When she stood in front of the mirror for an hour every morning, rehearsing how she would talk to him today. This behavior suddenly seemed more stupid than ever. Childish, very naive. And what was happening now? Another wave of memories followed the wave, a wave of burning awareness of reality, and the reality of what was happening. Suddenly her cheekbones flared up from this new knowledge, and after it a new facet of girlish feelings was revealed. There was no more childhood love, old memories flared up like dry leaves dropped by trees, instantly turning to ashes. The past, and along with it the past closed off, isolated boy, was replaced by a real, confident, strong and handsome guy, who occupied all her thoughts. Her lower abdomen was painfully and sweetly pulled down, and Sakura, with a strange mixture of shame, surprise and joy, realized that she was hopeless. The paper flap slid to the side again. "Your futons," said the girl in a dark turquoise kimono and, bowing, entered the room. A guy entered behind her, carrying 2 rolled-up mattresses with blankets, which he put on the floor. The girl went to the closet, took out several neatly folded sets of bed linen and spoke again in a pleasant voice, turning to Sakura. "All the linen, as well as towels and robes, are here. This," she shook the stack in her hands, "I will take to your companions. Rest." Another bow and the servant left the room. The kunoichi stood up absent-mindedly and walked to the closet. She took out the first bedding set she came across, unrolled one futon, and, moving purely mechanically, still made it up on the third try. Then her gaze fell on another, still rolled-up mattress, and the girl became embarrassed for some reason, instantly looking away. Then she stood up, went to the closet again, took out another set and made Sasuke's futon on the first try and very carefully. All this time she was in some kind of prostration. Any feelings receded, leaving behind only one thought, brightly pulsating red almost right before her eyes. But something still did not want to fit into her consciousness, so, having changed and folded her clothes next to the futon, Haruno climbed under the blanket and mindlessly stared at the ceiling, not even trying to sort herself out. Everything was so tangled that it was impossible to find the end of the tangled thread so that it could be wound back into a ball. Everything was extremely simple. Everything was crystal clear. Haruno Sakura was hopelessly in love with Uchiha Sasuke. Sakura woke up quite late, guided only by her internal clock and letting her body and thoughts rest. The futon next to her was the first thing she noticed, neatly made, as if it hadn't been touched since the night before. It was also surprisingly quiet, although Haruno was sure that it was at least 11 o'clock in the afternoon. The girl sat up in bed, collecting her thoughts. She came to terms with one of them, her new love for the new Sasuke, surprisingly easily, as if she were coming to terms with the weather today. But there were other important questions. For the first time since yesterday, she remembered Konoha, and now she had to decide who and where she would follow. However, this question was postponed for now. Sakura was not a 14-year-old girl, who even then had no right to act thoughtlessly, and now she did not want to make an unconscious choice, because she understood that, most likely it would be decisive. At the moment when Haruno was getting dressed and fastening the zipper on her vest, a sharp and short metallic scraping sound suddenly came from the direction of the inner garden. The girl's hand froze for a second, after which another sharp and short sound was heard. As if someone. Wanting to confirm her guess, the kunoichi approached the partitions leading to the inner courtyard and moved one of them aside. That's right. As if someone was training with a metal weapon. Two people were circling the neatly trimmed area. Sasuke and Suigetsu. The latter was as impudent as always and even a little vulgar, which was expressed in his manner of conducting the duel. The guy was constantly and feigning casualness waving Zabuza's sword, which was almost frankly unnecessary. Sasuke Haruno could not hold back a convulsive exhalation was the very embodiment of restraint and minimalism. Not a single unnecessary movement of the black katana, not a single unnecessary step. A sudden lunge and the duel began. Sakura, as if spellbound, admired the suddenly changed Suigetsu, his precise, in no way unnecessary or vulgar movements, the ease and dexterity with which he handled an impressively sized weapon, but Sakura admired Sasuke much more than him. Uchiha either glided or flowed right through the air above the ground, each movement a clear, precise continuation of the previous one, a classic example intended for admiration and imitation, but not for repetition, because repeating such a thing was unrealistic. The very calm, balance, and beauty. Even now the guy was amazingly beautiful. No, as if even the fact of a duel with a worthy opponent added even more beauty to him, bringing the last of the clan to an unattainable line of perfection. The girl could have continued to admire this fight, and probably for an eternity, but then a small bird flew right in front of her nose, distracting and taking the kunoichi's attention. Having followed its short path descent with her gaze, ending on the man's wide palm, Sakura only now paid attention to Yugo and Karen sitting on the edge of the wooden outer corridor. The latter, turning around, had apparently been incinerating her with her gaze from the very moment the kunoichi appeared, and when Haruno noted this fact to herself with no small surprise, she immediately turned away proudly. The man, as always, showed no interest in anything except, perhaps, the bird that had landed on his palm. However, the feathered creature did not linger on it for long and after a couple of moments, loudly chirping, fluttered back into the sky. This or maybe not distracted the opponents, and they simultaneously looked in the direction of the sound. "Good morning, doll," Suigetsu smiled, casually throwing his sword over his shoulder. "Although it would be much more appropriate to say good afternoon." After these words, Karen suddenly stood up sharply and, deliberately keeping her nose parallel to the floor, walked a little further along the corridor, which had no wall, opened some door, apparently leading to her part, and disappeared behind it, loudly slamming it shut. The swordsman shook his head in mock disapproval. "You got up late, it's almost lunchtime," Uchiha said, attracting Sakura's attention, who had been watching Karen leave and was now looking at the slammed doors with confusion. "It's okay," the medic replied, taking a few steps forward and kneeling down next to Yugo. The girl tried not to look at the Uchiha himself. "How is it not so bad if such a sweet girl?" the swordsman began, almost indignantly, but was interrupted by Sasuke's even voice. "Suigetsu, you were the one who asked me to train with you." "Oh yeah," the guy answered a little irritatedly and swung without looking, only pretending to attack. However, he had no chance to joke with Uchiha, apparently because of the latter's dislike of humor, especially during a duel, so the next second the swordsman had to defend himself seriously. Sakura carefully raised her eyes and realized that she could breathe again. Sasuke's address to her person had taken her breath away and her heart was beating at an accelerated rate. Now she could calmly admire her opponents again, which she did for a couple of minutes, but then her thoughts, as always running in a not very clear way, returned to the questions that had arisen earlier. To decide what to do, she needed to know the situation. Haruno looked at the man sitting next to her Yugo, motionless, watched the unfolding duel, and, it seemed, did not notice the medic's gaze at all. "Excuse me," Sakura decided to begin. "I would like to ask you something." The man remained silent, and the girl took this as an expectation of a continuation. "As a member of the team, maybe you know why Sasuke needs me?" Yugo turned his head and looked at Haruno attentively, but somehow strangely. "Is he even in his right mind?" she suddenly thought. "I'm sorry, I can't tell you," he suddenly answered in a slightly muffled voice. "Sorry," the girl answered a little embarrassedly, and turned her gaze back to her opponents. A thrust and blade meets blade, sparks flying from both sides under the pressure, and high-pitched creaking sounds. Sasuke and Suigetsu's faces are quite close, eyes level with each other, and as the tense seconds of the clash continue, the swordsman asks his question. "Do you think she will stay?" "She has no choice," Uchiha answers calmly. "You're so confident in yourself, Sasuke-kun," the swordsman remarked with an unpleasant smile and mockery. The upper lip of the last of the clan twitched slightly, although the enemy could not know that he had touched unnecessary memories, and his hand suddenly trembled, causing Zabuza's sword to glide loudly along Kusanaga's black blade, and although the Uchiha quickly and deftly dodged, it still hit him. A cut immediately appeared on the sleeve of his snow-white shirt, the edges of which quickly turned red. "Sasuke-kun!" Sakura jumped up from her seat and ran towards them, and Suigetsu nodded his head meaningfully to himself, as if beginning to guess something. "Let me see." Running up, Haruno reached for the Uchiha's sleeve. "Just a scratch." The guy pulled his hand back at first, but the medic intercepted it, lifting his sleeve up in one motion. The wound was quite deep and apparently affected quite a few blood vessels. Scarlet drops quickly gathered at the edges and, bending around Sasuke's hand, ran down. Haruno immediately raised her palm over the wound, concentrating her chakra. The guy's skin began to burn and tingle slightly, but it was not the first time that Uchiha felt the delights of the side effects of medical jutsu. In Orochimaru's lair, Kabuto had to use them quite often when the now truly last of the clan got too carried away with training or tried to jump above his head. The edges of the wound quickly healed, leaving narrow bloody trails that now had no reason. The greenish healing glow around Sakura's palm faded, but the girl remained motionless, continuing to look at the place where the wound had just been, suddenly realizing how close she was to the object of her new feelings and, moreover, touching him. "Thank you." It was even more unexpected to hear words of gratitude from the eternally cold Uchiha. "I'll go change," and he, breaking the contact of hands and passing Sakura, headed towards the rooms. The sound of sliding doors was heard. "It's a pity that I can't get hurt," Suigetsu, who had been standing next to her the whole time, said with skillful disappointment, causing the kunoichi to look at him in bewilderment. "It deprives me of the opportunity to be your patient, doll, and feel your care." Haruno didn't quite understand where he was going with this. She didn't understand this strange, impudent, and seemingly absolutely unprincipled guy at all, who still had a concept of seriousness. Incidentally, the latter didn't take long to come. The unpleasant smile suddenly disappeared from his face, and the protection fell from his light purple eyes, revealing their amazing depth. The guy raised his hand and gently removed a soft pink lock of hair from the medic's face. Sakura recoiled, but made no attempt to resist, unable to tear her gaze away from the new swordsman now. Suigetsu, suddenly not just cold, but downright icy voice of Uchiha broke the hypnosis that had taken hold of Sakura. The girl shook her head, throwing off the rest of the spell, and turned to Sasuke, as if he had called her, and not her partner, and she clearly felt how her ears instantly flared up, fortunately hidden by her hair. The last of the clan managed to do it just in time so that she would not succumb to the swordsman's game, but not having time to put on a new shirt, which was now flaunting in his hands, which allowed the girl to shamelessly admire his torso to steal the beauty that was not allowed to her. However, Sasuke, it seemed, did not notice her embarrassment, as if with an icy fire, burning with his gaze the culprit of his anger. "What is it?" Suigetsu spread his arms out to the sides, feigning incomprehension, once again becoming impudent and carefree. "I just wanted to make sure." "To make sure of what?" Sakura suddenly seized on his last word, turning around. She probably instinctively felt that this could be the key to the solution. "Nothing special, doll." The guy shrugged his shoulders for greater effect. Nothing special. And in his gaze, only for a moment, something predatory flashed, truly shark-like and something Haruno really didn't like. Dinner is ready, please join us. Only now did everyone notice the girl in a dark azure kimono standing slightly to the side and more behind Sasuke, bowing. Yes, right now, Uchiha answered for everyone, unfolding and throwing his shirt over his shoulders. The dinner was held in one common room, where there were already small cushions and covered tray tables exactly equal to the number of guests. Besides Taka and Sakura, there were 2 more people in the room, a young couple, busy with themselves and not paying much attention to the shinobi, so they did not interfere with them at all. However, inside the newly formed team, although Sakura had not yet decided anything and was sure that she could leave them at any moment without hindrance, apparently a storm was brewing. Sasuke, have you really become such a softy after Orochimaru's death that now you need a medic for every cut you get when playing with a weapon carelessly? Karen pretended to wrinkle her nose, as if this topic was very unpleasant for her. After her departure, she could not see what was happening in the inner garden, but she could perfectly well and felt all the bursts of chakra and energy flows, so what happened was not a secret for her, but rather an unpleasant reality. Sakura, attracted by the girl's words, but much more interested in the Uchiha's reaction, raised her eyes to the latter. Karen, know your place. The Sanin's pupil coldly put the girl down, without interrupting the process of eating. Having learned nothing new, Sakura also returned to eating. The rest of the dinner passed quietly. After the meal, Yugo immediately disappeared in an unknown direction. Karen proudly walked along with the rest and again locked herself in her room. Suigetsu and Sasuke continued training, and Sakura was again left in relative solitude. After tidying up all the throwing weapons, scrolls and medicine bottles after the mission, Haruno realized that she had nothing to do, so she decided to go to the hot springs the owner had mentioned yesterday to relax and try to think it all over again. For this, however, for some reason she considered it necessary to ask Sasuke's permission. The medic approached the doors again, opened them again and, looking up, was again deprived of the ability to breathe, speak and move. Sasuke and Suigetsu apparently decided to tighten up their training to the maximum, so after a fairly short period of time from the end of lunch, they began to catch their breath from time to time and both were already left without a top of their clothes. The moment of the Kunoichi's appearance just happened to coincide with a short break, so Sakura was noticed immediately. I'll go to the springs, can I? She answered Uchiha's questioning look, asking for some reason. Of course, he said briefly, raising his hand with the katana to his forehead and brushing away with his wrist the strands of his bangs that had fallen onto his face and the sweat that had probably already appeared. Hi! The medic exclaimed a little too loudly, and quickly slammed the partition back. Then she turned her back to it, covered her lowered face with her palms, desperately not wanting to see anyone and especially not to be seen, and for several minutes she came to her senses, clearly feeling how her ears were burning. Then, finally calming her heart rate, the girl went to the closet, opened it, took out a robe and a couple of towels and, following the signs, headed to the springs. The hot, humid air immediately got into her lungs, making her head spin a little and pressing on her temples at the same time. In order not to quickly get heat stroke, the girl, wearing only a towel wrapped around her body, sat down on the edge of the spring on the hot stones, lowering her knees into the water. The steam from the water slowly rose into the sky that had not even begun to darken yet. And it was generally a little unusual to take a bath during the day, but Sakura was not going to linger here for long. She just wanted privacy, so that she could calmly think and put everything in its place. Or at least try to do so. So, no one could answer her question, what do they, or rather just one specific person, want from her? Sasuke said that it was not important, Yugo that he could not say, Karen was not an option for Sakura at all, and for some reason she did not want to be alone with Suigetsu, despite his constant cheerfulness. On the other hand, Haruno understood that if she gave free rein to her heart, the Uchiha's words would be more than enough for her. Enough to follow him far away, to the ends of the earth, to certain death, and if he wished, even to give her life for him. But Sakura did not want to give free rein to her heart. She remembered Sasuke's past and his attitude towards her too well. But it was not that the girl did not hope for reciprocity, she simply did not believe. She was afraid to believe her happiness. Turning the corner that was wrapped inward, the girl unwound the already wet towel and completely lowered herself into the water, naked, relaxing and now, on the contrary, trying not to think about anything. But thoughts still crept into her head one way or another, and one way or another led her to only one person who had become, or rather remained, an unsolved mystery for Sakura. She did not understand Uchiha Sasuke at all. After the hot springs, Haruno found a massage parlor next to them and couldn't deny herself the pleasure, becoming the first visitor to the girls for almost the entire evening. Coming out of them full of new strength and peace of mind, the medic immediately, to her fear, ran into Suigetsu, who was walking around the hot springs wearing only a towel, shamelessly pulled down to his hips, which caused shy and playful smiles from the masseuses. "Hello, doll," as always, baring his sharp-toothed mouth in a smile, the swordsman greeted impudently, blocking Haruno's path with his hand raised to the wall, which forced the girl to stop. "The massage oils here are simply magnificent, or are they just these crumbs?" One quick cheerful glance towards the girls. "They worked well on you." The swordsman shamelessly looked down, slightly throwing his head back, at Sakura, who did not dare to raise her eyes to him, running his gaze over every curve of her body heated by the bath and massage, as if he was seeing her for the first time, and then suddenly spoke, leaning towards the girl's ear. "Do you want me to tell you about Sasuke's goals?" "Only I want an equal exchange." Sakura shuddered, not wanting to imagine, what the swordsman could demand in exchange for information. Suigetsu, again this icy, but so desired and saving for Haruno voice. "Do you also need to be reminded of your place?" Approaching the medic from behind, Sasuke put one arm around her shoulder and pulled her towards him, forcing the girl to take a step and press her shoulder to his chest, while Sakura still did not raise her head, clearly avoiding looking at anyone. Uchiha, on the contrary, did not take his direct and clearly unkind gaze off his partner. However, the latter quite calmly withstood the pressure from the last of the clan, still grinning insolently. After a couple of seconds of silent confrontation, Sasuke, dragging the weak-willed Kunoichi along with him, headed towards their rooms, no longer turning around to look at the swordsman. The latter looked after them for a long time thoughtfully, and then quietly said to the back of Orochimaru's protege, who had moved far enough away to not hear anything, "She is not just a prisoner for you, Uchiha Sasuke." Only after entering their room and only in its center, Sasuke let go of Haruno, though he seemed to make sure that she did not fall, like a released rag doll. After that, Uchiha took a couple of steps back, finding a switch in the darkness and pressing it, so he missed the moment when Sakura decisively turned around and apparently wanted to say something, but froze with her mouth slightly open. Finally, the Kunoichi noticed that Sasuke was dressed the same as Suigetsu, which once again left her speechless for a second. Uchiha waited expectantly in silence, while the girl pulled herself together, and then, taking a deep breath, she was finally able to speak. "Sasuke, please tell me everything," she said in one breath. "Everything?" Uchiha asked, just a little ironically. "Maybe you should clarify what exactly you're interested in." "You know what?" It was easier to speak now, but the girl could only withstand his direct gaze to the limit of her strength. There was no trace left of relaxation and peace of mind. Suddenly, Sasuke took the 2 steps separating them towards Sakura, reducing the distance to a few centimeters and placing his palm on the back of her head, ran his fingers through her pink strands, forcing the girl to tilt her head slightly. "Silly Sakura," he said, practically touching her damp hair with his lips, and although his voice didn't warm up even a degree, the girl could hear a strange concern in his words. "I did what you asked? Why are you asking stupid questions?" "Because they should have been asked back then." Sakura quickly raised her face, and all the words immediately disappeared, lost their meaning and sound shell. His face was too close. So close that she could feel his warm breath on her skin. She could look into those absolutely black eyes forever and fall into them for the same eternity. She could even feel the warmth emanating from Sasuke himself. It was the distance of warmth. What happened next was like a dream. Either the most terrible, or the most desired. Slowly leaning down, Uchiha carefully touched the girl's lips with his own. Sakura shuddered. The first movement was purely instinctive to push away the violator of all boundaries, but strong fingers on the back of her head did not allow her to recoil and her palms froze on his chest. The second, more confident touch of lips, and Sakura's eyelids themselves fell. Not her heart, her soul flew somewhere down. Her hips and lower back were brought together in an incomprehensible tension, and Sasuke carefully ran his tongue over her lips, parting them. A second, a tilt of the head, and he continued to kiss the girl either tenderly, or carefully, or soothingly. And then, Sasuke! The doors are open too wide, and the girl's voice is too tense in an attempt to hide her annoyance, and the moment is already lost. The crystal lace of the fairy tale is broken, and Sakura almost hears how its fragments fall with the thinnest ringing on the wooden floor, breaking completely and irrevocably. Yes, Karen. A cold, deathly cold voice and a half-turn of the head, but his palm is still on the back of her head, although in it one no longer feels that warmth and that care that seemed to surround them just a second ago. You, the girl hesitated for a second. The owner is looking for you, she was found. Some questions arose regarding payment. The girl shrugged her shoulders with feigned indifference, avoiding looking at Uchiha. Okay. I'm coming now. And now his hand leaves her hair. He takes a few steps to the side, opens the closet, takes out a robe, throws it over his shoulders and heads for the exit, and the kunoichi is still standing motionless in the center of the room, right now most surprisingly resembling a doll left without support, but still somehow miraculously maintaining its balance. Sasuke turns around, standing in the doorway, but doesn't say anything, just takes one look at Sakura before closing the rice paper partition behind him and following Karen. As if struck by lightning, Haruno continued to stand in the middle of the room. Her absent-minded gaze ran around the room, and she suddenly realized that the reality lost at the moment of the kiss was returning to her, bursting into her consciousness with 1,000 colors and shades, 1,000 sounds that did not even exist, and sensations, 1,000 feelings and emotions. And cold. Icy, winter cold. Cold without him. Without his warmth. The warmth of his hands. Lips. Skin. Sakura hugged herself, and realized that she was shaking slightly. As if she really had suddenly found herself in the very center of a winter cold with its unpleasantly sharp snow and bone-chilling wind. It seems that what yesterday seemed like just a tangled thread, today turned out to be a tightly tied knot, which was impossible to untie. Perhaps it was the feeling of déjà vu that prompted the girl to repeat yesterday's actions. Having spread out 2 futons and turned off the light, the kunoichi climbed under her blanket and curled up into a ball, trying to warm up. Everything was complicated. Everything was unclear. Everything was wonderful. Where is he? Who? Karen didn't immediately understand the question. Madara. Sasuke clarified, knowing full well that there couldn't be any problems with payment, and even if there could, Karen wouldn't run after him at the request of her mistress, considering her proud disregard for everything that had been happening in recent days. On the street. About 20 meters down the road from the entrance, the girl answered quietly and wanted to add something else, but Uchiha, having heard everything he needed, had already left her alone. The girl, with a strange bitterness in her eyes, looked after his retreating broad back. Going outside, Sasuke, not having walked even 10 steps, saw a figure in a black cloak standing on the road exactly on the edge of the night darkness and the light cast by the lanterns in the yard. There was no mistaking. Short black hair and an orange mask gave the guest away completely. However, he did not try to remain unnoticed. Any changes to the plan? Without any greetings, the younger Uchiha immediately got down to business. Any changes in your plan? Madara asked in a colorless voice. Sasuke remained silent, not understanding or only pretending not to understand what his interlocutor was getting at. Haruno Sakura, the true leader of Akatsuki, clarified after a short pause. But the guy was still silent. What kind of circus is this? This is not a circus, I just keep her to myself. The younger Uchiha answered in an even voice. Do you keep it to yourself? Be at the Valley of Fulfillment in 2 days, and you can take the Kyuubi straight from my hands. Do you think he will come? The elder one never tired of asking questions. Uzumaki? Sasuke remained silent for a second. He will come. I thought your goal was to destroy the Konoha government. Judging by the tone, one would think that Madara couldn't hold back a smile. And I thought your target was the Kyuubi. Sasuke countered coldly. Okay, the man was obviously very amused by the current situation. Do as you know. Just Sasuke, he stopped the younger Uchiha with his voice, who had already turned his back to him. Don't overdo it. The Sanin's pupil did not answer. He returned to the inn and wanted to head to the room. But then the hostess really caught him with some questions, so the guy did not return to Sakura soon and found her already asleep. Immediately after waking up, Sakura again had a strong feeling of déjà vu. Again, an empty, quiet room and again a neatly made, seemingly untouched futon next to her. At some point, the girl even suspected the possibility that yesterday was just her dream, nothing more, but her internal clock confidently said about 9 in the morning and a new day, refuting any doubts Haruno had. Having gotten up and changed, the kunoichi headed for the baths, at the same time asking the girls in dark azure kimonos she met to bring her breakfast. Having finished her morning water procedures, Sakura, returning to her room, ran into a group of some guys in the main hall. The company was clearly not distinguished by restraint and modesty, and its members were already pestering some of the serving girls, some of them Karen, who was also there. The latter was fiercely proving something to someone, not embarrassed by either the tone of her voice or the turns of speech. Noticing Haruno passing by, several guys rushed to her and quickly surrounded her, thereby depriving her of the opportunity to escape, even if she was noticed. "And you, beauty, wouldn't you like to join us?" one of them asked, smiling broadly. "I don't think so," Sakura answered briefly, internally tensing up. She could easily scatter those surrounding her into corners with taijutsu techniques alone, but she didn't want to cause problems for the innkeeper. Moreover, what is the rest of the crowd of healthy guys against one girl, even if she has excellent fighting techniques? "Come with us, baby," another guy chimed in, more lively and invitingly, but still quite cheekily. "Excuse me, I have to go," the kunoichi tried to slip between the two, but then she was grabbed rather roughly by the elbow, not letting her go. Sakura's other hand immediately clenched into a fist, and the girl was ready to pay back the violators of her personal space if necessary. But she was saved by circumstances in the form of Uchiha Sasuke, who somehow ended up here at that very moment. "It seems the girl made it clear that she is not pleased with your company." The voice was as cold and even as ever. The medic quickly turned her head towards the sound and, facing the same cold and calm gaze of its owner, instantly felt how not only her ears but also her lips flared up again, vividly reminding her of what had happened yesterday. "And who are you?" one of the guys said rudely. Something unkind flickered in the black pool of Uchiha's eyes, and apparently it was not only Sakura who noticed it, who was genuinely frightened at that moment for the noisy company. "Calm down, Izumi," the tall, fair-haired boy answered for Sasuke. "If the girl is busy, it's not in our rules to steal her without her consent." And he winked cheerfully at Sakura, who had turned to him, causing her to blush slightly, after which he freed Haruno's elbow from someone else's grip and even slightly pushed the girl towards Sasuke. "Let's go." Uchiha's voice didn't reveal a single iota of what had just a moment ago been going on in his gaze, after which the Sanin's protege turned around and walked toward their room. Without turning around, Sakura followed him. Neither he nor she could see the look the red-haired girl in glasses gave them. Entering the room, Sasuke stepped aside, letting the kunoichi go first, and closed the door behind her. "Sakura." His address ran along the spine like an electric wave, forcing me to turn around sharply and, as if a little nervously. "Yes, Sasuke-kun," Haruno exhaled with a small and incomprehensible pause. The corner of Uchiha's lips twitched slightly, like back then, during training with Suigetsu, but nothing more, and approaching her to a distance of only a small step, the guy continued. "Are you still so weak and haven't learned anything in 2.5 years?" The girl lowered her head from these words, avoiding looking at her interlocutor. "Sakura, I don't need weaklings on my team." "Sasuke-kun, Don't call me that," he interrupted her harshly. "Okay," Sakura said quietly, still not looking at Uchiha, not knowing what to say, but circumstances intervened again. "Your breakfast," the girl in a dark azure kimono announced as she entered, carrying a tray of food. And again the moment was lost. Uchiha quickly but calmly broke the distance between them, retreating towards the exit. "Sasuke." Haruno was unaccustomed to calling him by his first name, and she barely managed to hold back the suffix, "kun," that almost escaped. "And you?" "I'm not hungry." The guy stopped at the door and answered briefly and disappeared from sight. After having breakfast alone and leaving her empty tray in the inner corridor by the door, Sakura went out into the garden and sat on the edge of the wooden platform, leaning her back against one of the pillars. The Uchiha's words haunted her. Firstly, he had indirectly allowed or even ordered, depending on how you looked at it, to call him by his name. This could really mean a lot, and that was exactly what Haruno was trying to understand. And secondly, Sasuke had started talking about strength again, suddenly shaking the kunoichi's confidence that she had grown not only physically over the years. A little confused, her thoughts ran to memories, and then to a comparison of the past and the present. And again, she did not understand this man. She did not understand, but she loved him. And she could not do anything about it. Seconds ran one after another, turning into minutes and hours, and it was already approaching lunchtime, but the girl, deeply immersed in her thoughts, did not notice it. Her gaze seemed to be forever riveted to the high sky with rare scraps islands of clouds, which the mountain range confidently and even menacingly supported with snow-covered shoulders of passes and elbows of peaks. Haruno! An arrogant voice suddenly interrupted her thoughts. Absently turning her gaze from the heavenly heights to its source and not even immediately refocusing, the medic discovered Karen standing 3 steps away from her, her arms crossed over her chest and looking at her with disgust. Yes? It seemed that Sasuke's habit of giving short answers had begun to catch on to her. You want to know Sasuke-kun's goals so much? It wasn't a question, and her tone was firmly on one note of irritation. I'll tell you them, but after that you'll have to leave. Yourself. It clearly sounded like blackmail. For what joy? The girl asked calmly, clearly not intending to give in to the pressure of her interlocutor. It's Sasuke, not you. Sasuke? A note of surprise slipped through the irritation that Haruno had not added the required suffix. Yes, Sasuke, Sakura confirmed, and suddenly something in this puzzle finally fell into place. So it's all about Sasuke, she drawled, beginning to understand such a bright aggressive dislike for her on the part of Karen. In any case, know that his goal is… She ignored her opponent's words and almost opened the curtain of lies surrounding her for Sakura, but fate today did not tire of shuffling the cards as it pleased. Before Karen could finish speaking, the paper partition suddenly swung open and the last of the Uchiha clan appeared between them. His eyelids were lowered, so none of the girls saw in his eyes that terrible anger that was now blazing in them. The Uchiha took a short step towards Karen, and she, not even having time to see the expression in his eyes, but perfectly feeling the waves of practically uncontrollable rage emanating from him, gave a short, high-pitched squeak, and the next moment her head was shaken by a resounding slap, not strong enough to knock her off her feet, but enough for the girl to almost lose her balance. Sasuke! Sakura immediately jumped to her feet, but the terrible look of the Uchiha who turned around stopped her. The girl froze for a second, suddenly realizing what it was like to be on the shield rather than behind it, but the boy suddenly regained his self-control, and Sasuke once again became the very embodiment of November cold and indifferent calm. Without even glancing at Karen, who had fallen to her knees, he returned to the room, crossed it, and went out into the inner corridor, slamming the partitions together a little louder than he should have. Are you okay? The medic quickly sat down next to the girl who was holding her cheek with one hand and for some reason trembling and wanted to touch her, but… Get out of here! Do you hear me? Get out! Karen suddenly exploded and her voice clearly rang with resentment and anger, after which she jumped to her feet and ran to her unit, not shying away from expressing her emotions by slamming the partitions. Sakura sat there, simply at a loss. Suddenly, a new side of the changed Uchiha Sasuke was revealed to her, and it was far from the most pleasant. The medic could understand a lot, forgive a lot, but hitting girls, and hitting them in the face at that. But Haruno couldn't be offended or angry at the Uchiha, she couldn't understand what she was feeling at all. A new element appeared in the puzzle that couldn't be ignored, and Sakura realized that she had to think about everything anew, from a new position. She didn't want to go back to the room, although she knew that there was no one there, so the girl preferred to retire to the garden. Heading to the baths, Sasuke went into his and Sakura's room for bath accessories, and if he were a believer, he would most likely thank all the gods he knew at that moment. Karen, this hysterical, unbalanced Karen, contrary to all of Sasuke's expectations, did make contact with Sakura. Uchiha underestimated his team's sensor, underestimated. or, on the contrary, overestimated. Having skillfully and quickly masked his chakra the way Orochimaru taught him, the guy, without advertising his presence, began to silently approach the doors behind which the girls were talking, sensitively listening to their words and intonations. What joy! Sakura's voice was a little surprised, but overall calm. It was Sasuke, not you. Sasuke? Karen's mask of arrogance slipped for a second. And no wonder. Uchiha never allowed her to call him by his first name. Yes, Sasuke. Ah, so it's all about Sasuke. Little Sakura is not so stupid, although everything was practically transparent from the very beginning. Karen could not know about Haruno's love for Uchiha, which he played on, twisting the hapless medic like a toy, but the appearance of a new girl in the team, especially as a practically voluntary, albeit hostage, did not suit the censor at all. At first, Karen even tried to protest, but when Sasuke made it clear to her that he did not intend to change the plan, the girl pretended to be offended. Or maybe she really was offended. The guy did not particularly care. In any case, know that his goal is, but this was clearly unnecessary. Stupid Karen, you should have kept your mouth shut, as everyone from TAC was ordered to do. The rage caused by disobedience instantly overshadowed everything, covered his eyes with a bloody veil, subjugating his body. Well, he managed just in time, not letting the girl finish. Sasuke! Another one! A sharp turn, he almost does not control himself, but the bright green of his wide-open eyes suddenly seems like water absorbing and extinguishing the bloody fire of anger. Like a bucket of cold water. The raging fire subsides again, becomes under control. Without looking back at the seemingly whining Karen, Uchiha quickly leaves the scene, not so much out of fear of careless actions on his part, but in an attempt to finally drive away his anger. He will still need both Karen and Sakura. He cannot lose control over himself because of either of them. Especially because of the one who must remain in the holy confidence of his feelings for her for a few more days. But what Haruno was able to do just now, Sasuke definitely did not like. And now skillful warm fingers were kneading his back, giving his body a rest, but his brain was working hard, analyzing over and over again what had happened and what was happening in general. Something was definitely getting out of his control, slipping away, and that shouldn't be happening. Coming out of the massage parlor, Sasuke ran into the same fair-haired boy who had turned out to be smarter than the others that morning and hadn't claimed to be a medic. And again, Sakura. This girl had been taking up too much space in his thoughts lately. Good afternoon, the boy smiled amiably. I see that you have also managed to appreciate the talents of the girls here. Sasuke wanted to pass by, but the boy blocked his way, taking a step to the side together with the Sanin's protege. I would like to apologize for my friend's behavior this morning and, as compensation, invite you to our company. Neither you nor your girlfriend were at lunch, and for a certain fee, of course, we bought the dining room from the hostess until the night. What do you say? The boy exuded good nature and charm. And even despite this, in any other situation, Uchiha would most likely have refused, but now the idea of relaxing did not seem so bad. I'm afraid my girlfriend is not a fan of noisy companies, but I myself would not refuse sake. Perhaps it was a trick of the light, or perhaps the black eyes really did come alive for a moment in a feeling of, if not sympathy, then favor for the fair-haired guy. He in turn smiled understandingly, and somewhat mischievously, and the two of them headed toward the dining room. The pain in her cheek just wouldn't go away. Although, perhaps, it would have disappeared long ago, if not for the slap inflicted along with the physical one, a deeper and more offensive one. Perhaps these were the arguments of a jealous girl, and perhaps there was a grain of truth in the thoughts of the censor Taka. But the girl was firmly convinced that Haruno meant more to the Uchiha than just a hostage and a guarantee that the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails would come into their hands himself. How much more it was impossible to understand, and here Karen could certainly imagine all sorts of things, but still, she was not that stupid. She wanted revenge. Revenge for the humiliation Sakura had seen and for such generous, and even more humiliating sympathy. She hadn't even considered Uchiha Sasuke as an object of revenge, not even for a second, but as a tool. Haruno was probably a complete fool, having succumbed to Sasuke's manipulations so quickly and easily, and Karen definitely considered herself smarter and more capable than the medic. And more needed by Sasuke, which was quite important. Well, in order to make Sakura experience the greatest pain, it was necessary to act through Uchiha. Karen went to look for Orochimaru's protege. She needed to find out what mood he was in, whether he had recovered from his outburst of anger. Yes, she understood that she deserved this slap. She had disobeyed him, disobeyed the man she adored so much. She found this very man in the company of the guys from earlier, drinking sake, shouting songs and generally making a lot of noise. Sasuke was sitting next to some blonde guy and quite often applied himself to a cup of warm sake, carried around probably only by the bravest girls in dark azure kimonos. Well, that was just wonderful. The plan matured in Karen's head almost instantly, although it had several amendments at the time of the Uchiha's reaction. Returning to her room, the censor searched through the potion supplies she had taken from the northern lair, and quickly found the bottle she was looking for. A mixture that caused strong and quick intoxication, the same taste as sake. One of her best developments. In Orochimaru's lair, she spent a lot of time in the laboratories, searching for and creating her own methods of protection. Still, when all you can do is sense someone else's chakra, and at the same time you are dealing with rather dangerous people, you initially have to calculate many options. Returning to the dining room, tightly clutching the bottle in her fist, the censor discovered one of the maids in the corridor, judging by her concentrated and tense gaze, deciding, but not daring to enter the noisy company. When necessary, Karen knew how to use people. In addition to sensorics, the girl possessed another quality, the quality of a false Avesta. Karen could tune into people in a certain way and feel everything the way they felt, all their fears, doubts, joys and especially their pain. During the restructuring, a disorderly stream of thoughts and emotions of the servants poured into the consciousness of the Avesta, but the censor deftly erected a mental block, preventing the consciousnesses from mixing, and addressed the girl with the intonation that she needed most in those seconds. Help? A timid, confidential question, a bit of charm and a very friendly look. The girl looks at her with eyes literally pleading for help, but does not dare to say anything out loud. Give it here. After a short pause, she takes the initiative, gently touching in an attempt to take the tray with sake. I still need to give something to my boyfriend. One conspiratorial and absolutely discouragingly charming smile, and the tray is already in Karen's hands. Go, everything is fine. A patronizing look and the grateful, joyful servant flutters away, discouraged and embarrassed by the behavior of the guest. Supporting the tray with one hand, Karen uncorked the bottle and poured the contents into one of the bowls of rice vodka. Then, placing the tray on the floor, she had no intention of fulfilling the duties of a servant, and taking only the treasured bottle in her hands, Karen entered the room. The company made a rather ambiguous impression. Vulgar and obscene jokes were thrown not only at the servants, although no one seemed to resort to assault. Sake flowed almost like a river, and the not always clear words of drinking songs of clearly non-secular content were performed in most cases extremely out of tune, but never lost their rhythm and definitely with soul. Sasuke was amused to watch these drunk, cheerful people living one day at a time. He did not blame them or envy them, simply watching from the side and not forgetting to raise all the toasts together with everyone else. The desired effect was achieved rather quickly. After the fifth circle, oddly enough, glorifying the bright feeling of love, the image of the Konoha medic left the Uchiha's head, and he practically joined their company, with the only amendment being that alcohol did not affect him at all. At one time, Orochimaru and Kabuto had done a lot of damage to the young body, giving it immunity to many types of poisons, both natural and artificial. At some point, Sasuke didn't notice, Karen appeared. Perhaps succumbing to the general atmosphere of good nature and fun, Uchiha initially didn't even remember today's censor miss. Accompanied by a loud whistle and appropriate jokes and remarks, the girl, passing by everyone with a single bottle of vodka in her hands, approached the Sanin's protege and dropped to one knee in front of him, sitting down. I would like to make amends, Sasuke-sama. She still perceived people as herself, and in this case the object was specifically Uchiha. Perhaps if the girl wanted to manipulate the guy, he would have gotten himself a considerable headache, but fortunately for him, Karen was too blindly in love with him. The very essence of modesty and meekness, she froze in front of Sasuke, throwing hesitant, questioning, but not flirtatious glances at him, and tilted the bottle in her hands so that it almost touched the cup in Uchiha's hands. After her remark, the company whistled and applauded, clearly addressed both to the Sanin's protege and to the girl who dared to do such audacious thing, practically offer herself to the guy. But everything was not as simple as it might seem. Karen calculated her every step, every glance, every movement, instantly and accurately analyzing the changes in Sasuke's aura. Uchiha silently, without taking his eyes off the censer, lowered the cup lower, allowing the liquid from the vase to flow into it. When the container was filled almost to the brim, Karen removed the vase and looked at the guy questioningly. Outwardly so indecisive, she was absolutely confident in her success. Now he would drink and be completely hers. Only hers. She could play with him in achieving her goals, and in the morning she would be able to pretend to be a simpleton. Sasuke slowly raised the cup to his mouth and, to the ever-increasing cries of approval and applause, began to drink and finished halfway. But suddenly the doors of the room swung open, and in their opening appeared Suigetsu, who was least expected here and now and had disappeared somewhere since the morning. "Karen! Darling! There you are!" the swordsman exclaimed theatrically, plunging the entire company, including Karen and Sasuke in particular, if not into shock then into stupor with his appearance, after which he crossed the room with wide strides, picked up the girl, who had not even squeaked, in his arms and just as easily threw her over his shoulder, loudly slapping his open palm on the highest point of the censor's body at the moment. "Please forgive us, we are leaving," he bowed as much as possible with the girl on his shoulder and turning around, headed for the exit. "Have a nice evening." "Let go! Let me go!" Karen, who had suddenly come to her senses, began to wriggle like a snake, but what did her weak attempts at freedom mean to someone who could swing Zabuza's sword with one hand? "Sorry again." With a feigned hapless smile, not paying any attention to the rebellious girl, the swordsman turned around at the end of his path and returned the doors to their place. After that, the company simply exploded with loud remarks and laughter, and Sasuke, who was now ignored by everyone, put down the still not completely emptied cup and was now trying to understand what was going on. Suigetsu managed to shine definitely brighter and more unexpectedly than Karen, which immediately aroused suspicions about the girl too. At the same time, no matter how hard Uchiha tried to collect his thoughts, they stubbornly and persistently ran away from him, like the wind runs through your fingers. No matter how you grab it, you can't catch it. Suddenly it became surprisingly easy. The long-awaited warmth finally spread through the trained body of the young man. Sounds and colors acquired new shades, and his soul became unexpectedly calm. Finally? Was it ever different? Is it important? Let me go! Immediately! Right now! Karen literally howled with anger, not giving up her attempts to wriggle out of the swordsman's dead grip. Suigetsu, even whistling something, quickly reached their connected rooms, in one of which, the very last one, the light was on, went up to it, opened the doors and found a rather expected picture. Haruno Sakura stood in complete confusion in the middle of the room, near the closet, impressed, apparently, by the screams and threats of the censor on the guy's shoulder, which, by the way, were increasingly acquiring unprintable elements. "Hello, doll," Suigetsu greeted cheerfully, completely ignoring the background noise in Karen's face and voice. "By the way, Sasuke was looking for you." The swordsman easily walked past Haruno to the doors leading to the garden. At these words, Karen suddenly fell silent. "He's in the dining room now, you can easily find him there." Approaching the partitions, the guy opened one of them and stepped into the evening darkness of the garden, illuminated by the rare paper lanterns hanging on the branches of the trees, without turning to the medic to find out her reaction. Karen began to squirm and protest with renewed vigor, and Suigetsu even began to get rather annoyed with it. But then, finally, they reached the farthest part of the garden, where near the lush camellia bushes hiding the fence that separated the garden from the hot springs, there were several carved wooden benches. He sat the strangely quiet girl on one of them. "Before you say anything," he interrupted Karen, who had just opened her mouth. "Listen. Things like that." Suigetsu fished out of nowhere the now empty and painfully familiar bottle to Karen and tossed it to the girl. "Are not thrown around. And when they mix something into someone's sake, they usually look around." Having caught the bottle, the girl was ashamedly silent, not looking at the swordsman hanging over her. How could she have been focused on only one thing? How could she have managed not to see anything further than her own nose, if she had used practically her main weapon so ineptly? Suigetsu was silent, clearly allowing the girl to feel her stupidity in all the colors and shades of its charm. Having retired to the garden, among the lush camellia bushes, Sakura began to think it all over again, trying to put the puzzle pieces together over and over again. She didn't know what or who to believe, but at the same time, the circumstances were clearly deciding for her, ahead of the girl's decisions by not a step or two. Haruno collected and disassembled the puzzle pieces again and again, breaking them down into their components, analyzing them, trying to turn them around and play them from different angles. It was as if she was trying to put together a puzzle from separate pieces, without knowing the overall picture and clearly feeling the general lack of some important elements. Sakura was busy with self-digging until the evening, and only when it was already getting dark, and her stomach began to remind her that in the morning it had only had a long-digested breakfast, she decided to return to the general company. It took a long time to decide on this. Haruno, despite everything, really did not want to find out what moves fate or chance had already managed to make in this game in her voluntary absence, but hunger was clearly making itself known. Returning to the room and finding no one there to her relief, Sakura decided to visit the hot springs first. Since according to her calculations there was still time before dinner, there was definitely some noise somewhere. Most likely the morning company is having a good time, Haruno noted to herself, and then against the background of the general noise, one loud, high and very familiar voice began to stand out, becoming more and more distinct and noticeable, as if approaching. The kunoichi froze at the open closet, listening to Karen's promising threats to who knows who, but after a few moments the rice paper doors slid apart and Suigetsu, whom she had not seen since that morning, appeared before the girl, with a censer slung over his shoulder. "Hello, doll," the swordsman was as cheerful and carefree as always. Without stopping for a second, right on the move, and he was heading towards the garden, the guy informed Haruno. "By the way, Sasuke was looking for you." The extremely surprised Sakura did not even notice how Karen fell silent. "He is now in the dining room, you can easily find him there," and with these words the guy disappeared into the twilight of the garden. And again the kunoichi found herself without control over what was happening. Having approached and closed the partitions left open by Suigetsu, the girl decided to go and look for the Uchiha. However, she didn't have to look for him for long. As the swordsman had said, Sasuke was at the dinner table, surrounded by a well-known girl, but that wasn't what surprised the medic. What surprised, or rather even shocked her to some extent, was the behavior of the Sanin's protege, his pose, his raised palms to applaud the dancing and singing, his gaze, as if he was somewhat out of step with the movements of those around him, and the strange twitching of his cheekbones, as if trying to express some emotions through facial expressions. All of this told Haruno with terrifying clarity only one thing: Uchiha Sasuke was drunk. Quickly pushing the partitions aside, the medic crossed the room with a decisive step, approaching her former partner, and grabbing his outstretched hand, pulled him towards her, forcing the Uchiha to rise to his feet, immediately putting her shoulder under him and throwing the already caught hand over his head, preventing him from falling. The company, stunned by the courage of the local girls, cheerfully whistled, cackled and applauded the couple encouragingly. "Sakura, what are you doing here?" Oddly enough, Uchiha's voice was firm, and his tongue didn't even think of getting tangled. "The question is, what are you doing here?" Haruno answered irritably and led Sasuke to the exit. He moved his legs, by the way, quite quickly. "Sorry, friends, we'll leave you." The guy turned to the company, which had become noisy to the limit, and waved his hand as a sign of farewell. Drunken wishes for a sleepless night and an active and healthy rest flew after him, and at the same time to Sakura, from which the medic was ready to fall through the ground. Already in the corridor, halfway to their room, the girl was tired of Sasuke's clumsy vocal attempts, so she decided to interrupt his semi-melodic muttering. "Sasuke Uchiha, what's going on?" The relaxed and obedient Uchiha was, to put it mildly, a novelty to her, and Sakura definitely didn't like this new role of his. "What's going on?" "Well, now he's answering a question with a question. You're dead drunk." Sakura couldn't resist, but then Uchiha took a sharp step to the side. The girl, who hadn't expected it, was thrown to the side, and suddenly she found herself pressed against the wall, and the guy's palms were pressed against the tree on both sides of her head. "No, Sakura!" He pronounced her name syllable by syllable, burning into her with a strange, surprisingly lively gaze. "I'm dead sober." "You must have drunk more than 1 liter of sake." Haruno continued indignantly. Orochimaru gave me immunity to any dose of alcohol, so I'm completely sober. But, the girl began, but couldn't finish. Uchiha seemed not to hear her. The guy leaned closer to her face and, blowing his hot, drunken breath on her, whispered confidentially. I'm dead drunk on you, Sakura. He said her name again, syllable by syllable, as if from notes, and not letting the medic say a word, he pressed a kiss to her open lips. The girl immediately moaned in protest, simultaneously trying to push away the completely impudent Uchiha, but one of his hands instantly fell on her back, mercilessly pulling and pressing her to the male body. Sasuke selfishly, possessively took what he so desired, not caring about anyone's opinion. His movements were not seductively cautious or tenderly slow like yesterday with his pressure and definitely aggressive passion. The guy easily suppressed Haruno's hesitant protests, in which a real battle between reason and feelings was now unfolding, and the latter were definitely gaining the upper hand. Perhaps, along with the kiss, some of Karen's mixture was transmitted to Sakura, because Sasuke did not drink anything else after that, which could not help but affect his body, which had never known alcohol in his life. At that moment, when the resistance from the kunoichi was finally suppressed, Sasuke began to retreat backwards along the corridor, approaching their room and simultaneously pulling the girl along with him. Why? The censor suddenly began quietly, but with obvious notes of resentment and fading anger. Why did you do this? Why did you take her side? I didn't take anyone's side, Karen. Suigetsu leaned in front of her, whispering these words now practically in her ear. I'm just amused by this situation, nothing more. I'm amused by how this doll affects our cold and balanced Uchiha Sasuke. He straightened up again and looked down at the girl. She has a lot to learn, Karen, don't deny it. Although, perhaps our girl has it by nature, so you will never have the same. The censor pulled her legs up, pressing her forehead into her knees. Falling asleep in the embrace of strong arms, Sakura, lying on her side, felt someone else's hot chest and stomach with her back, and his even, calm breathing and the touch of slightly parted lips with her hair. Everything was crystal clear. Everything was amazingly clear. And silly little Sakura just still didn't know about the last piece of the puzzle she still hadn't completed. However, this was the least of her concerns now, because she was happy. Because she was desired. Because I was deceived. The new morning was really starting out like a fairy tale for Sakura. Because what could be better than waking up next to your loved one? Haruno furtively, with just one eye and unable to hold back a bright smile, examined the face of the still sleeping guy. His beloved features seemed calm, relaxed and more beautiful than ever. Carefully and very quietly, the girl rose from her place, from the sheets that were still unstraightened and bunched up. Embarrassed and at the same time strangely proud of her nakedness, she carefully wrapped herself in one of them, leaving a long white train, and now looking more like an elegant porcelain figurine. On her tiptoes she approached the doors leading to the garden, pushed them open as quietly as possible, turned to the sleeping Sasuke and slipped out into the outer corridor. The morning was surprisingly quiet and bright, gentle and warm. Haruno could not hold back some kind of joyful smile, at the same time a little embarrassed and bright. Everything was singing inside, everything was singing outside. The morning sun was vividly playing with glare on the stream, gilding the foliage of bushes and trees, giving its gentle light to the blossoming buds of flowers. Somewhere in the sky a lark was singing, giving the air a special freshness and purity. Sakura was smiling blissfully, drowning in these fabulous, bright moments, but suddenly the idol of this morning, the idol of her world was disturbed. How? A quiet, as if suddenly hoarse voice. The medic turned her head towards the sound and found Karen 10 steps away from her, who was looking at her in surprise and confusion at the same time, clasping one of the pillars with her hands, as if afraid of falling without support. An embarrassed, beautiful and its innocent smile blossomed on the face of Sakura, who looked down from the fact that her happiness did not go unnoticed. But the censor's next words surprised the girl quite a bit. Kami, Haruno, what a fool you are! The medic raised her surprised eyes to Karen. He was just using you, playing, and you. Her tone almost asked her to say that all this was not true and she simply misunderstood everything, but Sakura continued to be questioningly silent, not taking her sincerely surprised gaze off her interlocutor, and thus confirming all of Karen's worst fears. The censor knew, of course, she knew that everything would most likely be like this. But, As is well known, hope dies last. The girl took a few steps forward, still just as confused, and then her face twitched sharply, and her open lips slowly formed into an extremely unpleasant smile. Silly Haruno! Her voice couldn't hide the triumph and mockery, and it wasn't clear that Karen was trying to do so. Well, now I think I can calmly say it, you lost. I don't remember you and I competing in anything. Haruno answered, still somewhat perplexed, but now more cautiously. If you're talking about Sasuke. Exactly, my dear, I'm talking about Sasuke, the censor was practically singing in a frankly mocking voice. Have you learned his true goals? No? So know this, today we are crossing that mountain pass, Karen nodded towards the ridge, and tomorrow afternoon I quote, in the Valley of Fulfillment, Uchiha Sasuke makes an exchange of Haruno Sakura for Uzumaki Naruto. The medic's eyes widened for a second. What are you? Why does he need Naruto? A new piece of the forgotten puzzle? The decisive piece? Because the nine-tailed demon fox, needed by Akatsuki, is imprisoned in it, his voice. Sakura slowly turns around and looks at the half-dressed Uchiha Sasuke, standing in the opening between the doors and calmly and absolutely coldly and indifferently looking at her. And a few days ago, Taka and Akatsuki united under one leadership, the guy answered the unasked question. Get dressed, Haruno. We'll be leaving in an hour. Sakura felt her knees buckle. This concerns you too, Karen, the guy glanced towards the censor, after which he disappeared from sight, moving deeper into the room. But, as if in a hopeless search for answers, the medic turned back to the girl. All this time you were a hostage. Well, in order not to complicate his life with ropes and your resistance, Sasuke simply used you, she explained generously, measuring the medic with a triumphant look and going to her room. She did not dare to disobey the Uchiha. Sakura slowly sank to the floor, confused. Shock. New puzzle pieces refused to fall into place, literally falling out of her weakened, thin girlish fingers. The morning didn't seem so beautiful anymore. She saw colors and objects and didn't notice them. She listened to sounds and voices and didn't hear them. She touched and didn't feel them. It was as if someone had turned off all 5 senses at once, leaving only emptiness. There was emptiness in her body, because there wasn't a single thought in her head, and it seemed as if her heart had stopped beating, and her lungs had stopped inhaling and exhaling air, and there was emptiness in her soul, because suddenly all the colors not only faded, but disappeared, suddenly simply ceasing to exist, as did sounds, and lines, and especially feelings. A strange emptiness without color or smell, sound or taste. Vacuum. They climbed higher and higher, no longer following any roads or paths, climbing straight to the pass through the forest. Sasuke was always ahead, immediately behind him Karen, Suigetsu, Yugo, and finally, the last one again Sakura. The girl did not remember anything. Not how she dressed, mechanically, but still a little convulsively, still trying to understand something, not how she ate, out of pure biological necessity supplying the body with the substances and elements it needed, not how they left the inn, accompanied by the most varied looks and remarks of the previous company. She did not remember and did not feel. The words did not want to form not only sentences but phrases, and each of them separately was now only a sound wave, a meaningless vibration of the air. Therefore, Sakura did not think. She simply could not. All systems failed, switching to autopilot mode. The puzzle remained disorganized. Coma. Higher and higher, and now the rich, broad-leaved multi-level vegetation has given way to mosses, lichens and tall old conifers, and boulders have begun to appear, and then whole boulders that have rolled down here, apparently, from the peaks or the pass. They walked in silence, the Uchiha, indifferent to everything, the proud, joyful, but not daring to talk about its censor, the tireless swordsman, the serious man and the insensitive girl. The temperature dropped noticeably, and the hot air on the exhale began to turn into quickly melting clouds. The trees began to thin out. In the gaps of the wide flat crowns, low, as if swollen, whitish clouds became visible. Karen was the first, followed by Suigetsu, Yugo, and finally Sasuke, who took out, put on, and wrapped their insulated cloaks tightly. Sakura alone did not take any such action, whether because she did not have a cloak or because she did not need one, it was not known. No one was interested, and Haruno did not notice anyone or anything anyway. A wind arose, chilling, piercing. The first snowflakes began to fly with the wind, sharp and cutting. Apparently a snowstorm was raging on the pass. All the trees and vegetation parted and suddenly disappeared, except for the moss underfoot, and even that soon disappeared under the white snow cover. The wind grew stronger, howling, penetrating to the bones, mercilessly cutting the skin with razor-sharp snowflakes. The travelers entered a blizzard. They had already covered almost half the distance, half of the roaring, merciless pass, sinking knee-deep in snow, hiding their faces from the wind and only thanks to the chakra running through their entire bodies not getting frostbite on their extremities. Suddenly the medic, who was walking at the end and even lagging behind a little, hugged herself with her arms, although most likely only purely instinctively, and tripped and, like a doll, fell face down in the snow. 0. Oddly enough, it was the censor who stopped and turned around first, then Sujetsu and Yugo. Karen looked haughtily at the lifeless fallen figure of the medic, the pink strands scattered across the snow, the arms spread out in a very limp manner, after which she spat out poisonously, unable to hide her sarcasm. "Wake up, Haruno. It's not time to sleep." Whether in response to her words, or not even hearing them, Sakura raised not her head, but only her eyes. Suddenly terrifyingly alive, unbearably real, bitterly icy bright green eyes. And their gaze was directed past everyone and everything, only at one person. If Uchiha Sasuke had not been himself, he would have surely staggered, like any normal person in his place, convinced that if a look cannot kill, then one can certainly express this desire vividly. The black pools did not waver for a second, and with one fleeting movement he unbuttoned his cloak, after which he threw it right onto the snow and went to meet the girl who was already rising. The challenge was thrown down. The challenge was accepted. 0. Suddenly everything, absolutely everything, cold, wind, snow, pain, hunger, thirst, hearing, sight, smell, touch, taste, colors, sounds, sensations, feelings, shades, emotions, everything returned and for a moment, like one huge snow avalanche, buried, engulfed, flooded consciousness. As if at once a force was applied to a vacuum, salpidum to a coma, a push to 0. One drop can fill the ocean. One spark can cause an explosion. One vibration can upset the balance. The understanding of everything came instantly, like a bright, blinding flash, which made her want to blink, as if she had lost her sight for seconds in reality. In one moment, the puzzle that had been haunting Sakura all these days came together by itself. As if a kaleidoscope had been accidentally touched and turned over, which made all the elements fall into place at once, presenting the final result, the final picture, terrifying in its transparent clarity. She had been used. Used dirty, vile, calculating. She had been betrayed. Betrayed in a way no one had ever betrayed. In a way she could not even imagine. They had fooled her like a 5-year-old girl. And most importantly, how could she allow herself to think that he had changed? He had gone for power and authority, and had received them. And power corrupts. It was lower than mere dishonor, more disgusting than mere filth, more scorching than mere absolute 0, deeper than mere abyss, more painful than mere pain, worse than mere death. "Wake up, Haruno. It's not time to sleep." A familiar voice. Whose? It didn't matter. Right now, in the whole world, there was only one person who interested the medic. And raising her eyes, she easily found him, as if the other figures did not exist in this blizzard, icy wind and blinding snowy whiteness that obscured her eyes. He stood farthest from her, cold, perhaps colder than even this wind, indifferent, perhaps more indifferent than even these rocks, merciless, perhaps more merciless than even this blizzard. He did not retreat or flinch under her gaze, but threw off his cloak and walked towards her, stopping at a distance of 4 or 5 steps by the time she had already fully stood up. "Do you want to tell me something?" An indifferent question. "No," was the same dispassionate answer, devoid of feelings and emotions. "No one is to interfere," Uchiha said, a little louder than usual, so that those standing behind him would definitely not overhear. "Begin." He remained motionless. Frozen muscles were difficult to control, and Sakura had not intended the first blow to be the last one. It was only a warm-up, so Uchiha easily dodged her first few attacks, but the movement helped the medic to more or less revive his frozen body, subdue it, and make it move the way she wanted. Therefore, Sasuke clearly did not expect a sharp, strong blow to the solar plexus. He even had to intercept the other's hand in a block, diverting the dangerous force. However, the first blow was immediately followed by a second one, logically continuing it. But the guy was already ready, still eluding. He went back, instantly breaking the distance. Knowing full well that Uchiha could drive her like this forever until she simply ran out of steam, Sakura decided to finish the warm-up. She would warm up in the process. Knowing full well that she was no fighter at a distance, the girl shook her right palm a couple of times, concentrating the transformed chakra on her fingertips, and seemed to scribble her fingers, which had begun to flicker faintly, across the center of her forehead. The medic never liked this procedure, but sometimes, in emergency situations like this, it was simply necessary. The chakra wave passed through the frontal lobes of the brain and reached its target, the hypothalamus. The girl's head involuntarily jerked back from not very pleasant sensations, but the deed was already done. The alarm signal, albeit a simulated one, had been given and the release of adrenaline into the blood had already begun. Sakura practically felt her pulse instantly increase, her breathing quicken, her pupils dilate. A living warmth suddenly began to flow through her veins, vessels, capillaries, spurring her to move, simultaneously relaxing and tensing her muscles, forcing them to contract rhythmically. Having jumped a couple of times in place, as if trying out a training model for a kick, the girl took off. The guy calmly awaited her further actions, absolutely confident and cold-blooded, and therefore allowing himself to play. To play and see what Sakura was really capable of. No more than 2 seconds had passed since he had broken the distance between them, having already figured out Haruno's main fighting technique. But suddenly the girl disappeared from sight, and only on the level of pure reflexes and fighter's instincts Sasuke was able to parry a sharp blow from a kunoichi who had somehow, and when appeared behind his back, and even then he had to use the hilt of the kusanagi. Otherwise he would have been guaranteed to have damaged kidneys, and most likely, internal bleeding. Sakura is not just a fighter, she is a medic, which could not but affect the accuracy, prudence and danger of her blows. The latter now came in fast continuous series, forcing the Uchiha not only to dodge, but also to block. He hadn't struck his blows yet, on principle, wanting to show the arrogant kunoichi the difference between them. The one who disobeyed had to be punished, the one who encroached on the right of primacy had to be crushed, the one who thought too highly of himself had to be put in his place. She had no right to even contradict him, but for some reason Uchiha allowed her to try. As she carried out her combinations, Sakura did not think for a second about the correctness of what she was doing, or about the meaning at all. Perhaps it was a stupid childish desire to inflict pain in return, even if only physical. Perhaps it was the same thirst for revenge that once moved the Uchiha. Perhaps it was an attempt to prove her equality, just as Sasuke Naruto had once tried to prove it. Perhaps. She had no time for reflection and introspection, she simply could not lose. At some point, feeling the first, still almost imperceptible signs of not even fatigue, a slowdown in rhythm, the kunoichi realized that time was now working against her. For a few seconds she broke the distance, fishing out of her bag an ampoule with glucose frozen at sub-zero temperatures, simultaneously melting the crystals inside the syringe with her palm, hot from chakra, and without even looking down, drove the needle into her thigh, giving an injection. The empty ampoule flew into the snow, and the medic did not have much time left until the glucose would support, and even increase the adrenaline level. Now every blow should be like the last. Uchiha simply didn't have time to analyze the cunning of Haruno's actions. 2 seconds of respite, and she again brings the distance closer, and around her tense thin fingers, folded together, chakra is already shining, which under no circumstances can be safe for the guy. Instincts work themselves, and a split second before her pinpoint, the most precise from a medical point of view strike, a discharge passes through Sasuke's body. In a split second it grows and goes beyond the body, burning the girl's hand, depriving her of control over the limb. In theory. But the blow unexpectedly reaches its target, a painful point between 2 ribs on the left, which, if not for the current sent through the muscles by Uchiha, could have seriously damaged the guy's heart. For a moment he loses air, something flashes before his eyes and explodes, indistinguishable among the whitish blizzard and the same sky. Immediately after this, the medic already delivers a symmetrical blow to the other side, But unexpectedly Uchiha comes to his senses. His black eyes flash scarlet, and the chakra concentrated around the fingers saves the cells and neurons from being electrocuted, and the blow reaches its target. Immediately behind it is a symmetrical second one, not taking his eyes off the Uchiha's face, so as not to miss a single emotion, not a single painfully distorted feature, but suddenly their gazes intersect and nothing. Nobody. At all. The same whitish snowstorm, the same low or high sky made of a continuous shroud of swollen clouds, the same snow, the same wind breaking into a whistle and wheeze. And no one. Neither Uchiha nor his team. Sakura froze, in a fighting stance, not finishing her blow, tense to the limit. But nothing. Only snow and wind. Looking around herself over and over again, fearing the banal effect of genjutsu, the girl accidentally glanced at her hand, still raised to strike, and then she became truly scared. Her palm had already half turned into ice, into real, crystal clear ice, with thin white threads veins of apparently former vessels. Not believing her eyes, but at the same time panicking, realizing that her hand was no longer under her control up to the elbow and the strange technique was spreading higher and faster throughout her body, the medic touched the damaged area with her other hand and almost screamed. That one had also begun to freeze. First a light, frosty tingling, then an ever-increasing cold, loss of sensitivity. Marble whiteness and its gradual fading into icy crystal. From the elbow to the shoulder, along the collarbone and up the throat, but at the same time inside, deep into the cold, a terrifying, prickly cold was quickly approaching the medic's heart. Panic confused all thoughts, mixed up the cards, and the kunoichi didn't even have time to do anything before 1,000 thin needles of frost pierced her heart, which was no longer pumping blood ice. Alive. There is a forest ahead, unfamiliar, but for some reason she is sure that she is already in the land of fire. Behind her a waterfall is rustling. She turns around and sees 2 stone sculptures in the form of human figures on both sides of the flow of water flying down. And on the one farthest from her there are 2 people standing. She cannot see their faces, the distance is telling, but the medic immediately recognizes them, a tall brunette and a blonde, slightly shorter than him. They are standing with their backs to her, perhaps talking about something, and suddenly begin to walk away, moving away from Haruno, without even turning around. Nar, she wants to scream, but she can't. Her throat is squeezed by a terrible force, depriving her of the ability not only to speak, but also to breathe, causing her muscles to involuntarily and quickly contract, as if she were being strangled. Her vision darkens, all systems sound the alarm, and it seems that her brain is about to explode from lack of oxygen. Attempts to save herself are pointless. Agony. Darkness. Alive? Alive, but chained to a chair with iron shackles that fix her ankles, wrists, and chin. It's dark around, only a lamp with a blindingly bright light on the table next to her, and opposite her sits Kakashi-sensei, for some reason looking at the floor, and behind him stands Tsunade-sama, who, unlike the copy, looks very heavily at Sakura. The girl wants to shrink, disappear, fall through the ground under the pressure of this usually calm, and now not just angry destructive look, but it is impossible to lower her head because of the cold iron clamp for the chin, and the medic quickly looks away at least. Find out everything from her, the Hokage says in an icy voice. Hatake runs his hand through the hair that has fallen over his left eye, raises his head and calls out to his student. Sakura. The girl involuntarily casts a fleeting glance back at the sensei, and speak, and she is already captured by her mentor's Sharingan. Still alive? Yes, but better death than such a life. The pain, like thousands of incessantly itching drills, pierces the entire body, every cell of it. It is not blood that runs through the veins, lava, mercury through the lymph nodes, burning, destroying everything from the inside, and the girl even hears the smell of burnt meat, a disgusting, bitter, suffocating smell of scorched flesh. She wants to scream, but the scream drowns, bubbles in her throat along with that lava blood, gurgling, trying to break free, leaving in her mouth this terrible, vile taste of soot and metal, burning the sky with heat, burning the medic from the inside. All the internal sensors go off scale, splitting the brain with a rattling, nerve-wracking ringing, forcing the eyes to crawl out and flow with icy tears. The intestines twist, turn inside out, convulse, wriggle like a living snake inside the body. The nerves hum, vibrate, as if strings, bending the tortured body in endless madness. There is no external influence, but the nails peel off by themselves, exposing living, bleeding flesh. Every bone, every joint, and every dried-up tendon are crushed into the sharpest fragments, cutting tissues and vessels from the inside, getting into them, causing unbearable, hellish pain, and the vocal cords are already destroyed, burned, and it is impossible to find deliverance in the soul-piercing cry of agony and despair. Pain is omnipresent. The pain is unbearable. Pain is eternal. And only after the passage of infinity, darkness. Alive again? What are you? A dream? An illusion? A hallucination of the inflamed brain of a man gone mad with pain? Who are you? A skinny blonde boy standing in front of me, crucified between iron shackles. Why are tears running from your blue eyes, leaving thin wet paths on your cheeks with striped scars? Why is the torn stomach visible from under an open black and orange leotard, as if someone was tearing, biting into your flesh? Blood is running in spurts out of every torn vessel and will never rise back to the heart. You will die very soon, boy, I tell you this as a doctor. And why are you smiling like that? So sad, a little painfully and disappointed? Where are you, my death? Her pink, shoulder-length, unwashed hair has matted into one disorderly tangle like tow. Her entire body has grown thin, the cheekbones on her face have become sharp and predatory. Her skin is pale and constantly itchy, but the shackles on her hands keep her from scratching. She, in a single torn, dirty shirt, stale from sweat and blood, is kneeling in front of the chopping block. Around the scaffold is a crowd, in which familiar faces of fellow villagers, co-workers, friends? Once friends flicker. The sun shines dimly on the back of her head, depriving many colors of their usual brightness. A weak wind blows on her tortured body, her crippled soul. He used her and betrayed her. The only one she loved. They turned their backs on her. All of them. One by one. The 3 people dearest to her. Kakashi-sensei who tortured her. Tsunade-sama who ordered it. Naruto who was disappointed in her. They brought her down, humiliated her, crippled her, trampled her into the dirt and left her there to die, either out of mercy or pity, finally deciding after an unknown amount of time, eternity, to end her existence here, on the chopping block, in a public execution. There is no more strength and no more emotions, no more feelings and hopes. Tired of fighting. A talentless, thoughtless, hopeless existence. Doomed, slandered, deprived. Weak. I don't need weaklings on the team. Someone standing behind her reads out the sentence in a loud voice, accusing the girl of treason and aiding the Akatsuki, and all she can think about is, faster, faster, because it is impossible to die so basely and vilely, yet it is impossible, unthinkable, unrealistic not to want, not to desire desperately, to the point of physical pain, to the point of grinding teeth, to the point of wheezing, it is impossible not to thirst for life. A living, real life, which was and which is no more. Even before the sentence is finished reading, she lowers her head, buries her forehead on the chopping block and bites, quickly and often bites her lips so as not to scream, to hold back her voice, and from her eyes endless, bitter, hot tears flow, not in streams, but in rivers and torrents, not granting liberation, but on the contrary, forcing one to choke, shaking her already trembling chest, distorting her entire face with a painful spasm. Only on the very edge of the abyss, already falling into this black chasm from which there is no escape, one can want to live so much. Heartbreakingly, greedily, endlessly. Desperately, passionately, bitterly. Hopelessly. When did it all start? At what damn moment did it all go to hell? She definitely knew the culprit, she knew her worst enemy, and moreover, she felt his presence. His cold, indifferent gaze lay heavily on the back of her head, pinning her forehead to the chopping block. No way. Sakura croaked, trying to raise her head. Through the struggle, pushing against his terrible, oppressive, heavy force, as if overcoming gravity itself, Haruno slowly raised her bright, tear-stained eyes and saw him in the crowd, in which not only people but faces suddenly disappeared, leaving behind scarecrows and mannequins stuffed with hay and fluff, dressed in whatever they could, soulless, dead, disgusting. There was only him, he, the reason for her hatred, burning, razor-sharp, hot icy hatred. Her killer. The corners of her lips involuntarily twitched upward from burning disgust at this bastard, and her face distorted into an uncontrollable grimace of contempt for this disgusting man and Sakura freezes, not finishing the blow, staring fixedly, wide open, into the Uchiha's burning Sharingan. Suddenly her face is distorted by a terrible spasm, and her whole body begins to tremble finely. Sasuke, the ever-cheerful Suigetsu, suddenly calls him seriously, having previously watched the duel between the medic and the boy with genuine interest. But Uchiha does not hear him, and Haruno begins to shake even harder. Sasuke! The swordsman runs up and sharply shakes the Sanin's protege by the shoulder, and the girl's agony continues to increase, but suddenly, although clearly not due to Suigetsu's efforts, it stops. Something changes in the green eyes, covered with a genjutsu fog, and the world shatters into thousands of pieces, like the most beautiful and picturesque vase of the finest porcelain, and these pieces fall down with a ringing sound and drown in the absolutely black, dead water, on which Sakura stands without making any effort, and he stands in front of her. It is neither light nor dark here, but everything seems to be in a fog, because the edge of this mirror-like, bottomless black expanse of water is not visible, and the sky from which the gray snow mixed with soot is slowly swirling is not visible. No wind. Silence. Lifelessness. Sasuke looks into her burning, more alive than ever, bright green eyes with his own impenetrable, black as the water beneath them. Hatred and calculation. Feelings and control. Fire and ice. Life and lifelessness. Your hot hatred pleases me much more than your sweet love, he says calmly, but not coldly or indifferently, after which his hand in a white sleeve, like a bird's wing, flies up. He accidentally touches the skin on her cheek with his knuckles, presses his index and middle fingers together on her forehead, and Uchiha, whispering something with just his lips, raises his hand, touching the girl's cheek with his knuckles, presses his index and middle fingers together on her forehead, and Sakura's eyes, still covered with a hazy veil, close, and her body relaxes, her legs give way, and if Sasuke hadn't caught her, the girl would have fallen into the snow again. The swordsman removes his hand from the Uchiha's shoulder, lowers his eyelids, exhaling with relief, and hears, "Take off your coat." "What?" the guy asks again, not believing his ears, looking incomprehensibly at Sasuke, who is holding the medic's limp body to himself with one hand. "She'll freeze," the Sanin's protege condescends to explain as if nothing had happened, after which, with a short chuckle, Suigetsu takes off his heated cloak and gives it to Sasuke. "And I'll take yours?" the swordsman cheerfully says, and instantly appears next to the cape that Uchiha had discarded at the beginning of the fight, picking it up and shaking off the snow. Without answering, Sasuke wraps Haruno tighter in a warm cloth, lifts her up in his arms and walks past his subordinates, the always calm Yugo, the once again cheerful Suigetsu, and the seemingly confused Karen. He walks past and continues the interrupted passage through the pass, as always cold and indifferent, so similar to the snowstorm surrounding them. What was cannot but leave a trace, although it will forever remain only between two souls: the blade and the master who forged it. He won't let the girl out the entire time they're walking through the snowstorm. He won't let her out even when the bad weather is behind them and they're already starting to descend from the other side of the mountains. He won't let her out when they enter the forest closer to nightfall. He won't let her out until they decide to stop for the night to replenish their chakra reserves and relieve fatigue. He won't let her out until the swordsman chops down some spruce, carries it in an armful and covers it with a cloak. Only after that will the guy lower the still unconscious Sakura onto the bed, whose oblivion will soon turn into a deep sleep. And he won't leave her side for a second, sitting next to her while they light a fire, divide their rations, and settle in for the night. The knot of threads of their destinies will be impossible to unravel, even if their paths again run in different directions. Never. == 5. Vacation. == 5. Vacation. The awakening was slow and even painful, like rising from a great depth through something thick and viscous, but closer to the surface it became more and more mobile and fluid. The heavy, murky oblivion gradually let go, left the body with each exhalation, drop by drop, a small part of itself, ceasing to fetter the chest, finally allowing one to breathe calmly. It was already quite easy, the rise was accelerating, the girl was at the very surface and even distinguished rare glares on its reverse side. She was practically flying down? Or falling up? Her eyelashes fluttered and then fluttered as if by themselves. She was lying on her side, her feet towards the occasionally crackling fire, between two insulated cloaks. There was a forest all around. The time of day was night, judging by the darkness that dissolved everything within a radius of 5 or 6 steps from the fire. Her body, all systems and organs were normal, at least nothing was broken or seriously damaged. A quick internal scan did not reveal any defects or malfunctions, only some heaviness in the muscles, probably from physical exertion. What was she doing? Oh yeah. Fighting with Sasuke. Then Genjutsu, a strange world with black water and snow mixed with soot. And then darkness. She didn't even want to remember the essence of Genjutsu, that little eternity, that whole life, that terrible, merciless false reality that she had probably lived for just a few seconds. Although she remembered it anyway. The girl reflexively tried to swallow, but she couldn't. Her mouth was drier than the desert surrounding Suna. Coughing hoarsely, Sakura tiredly raised herself on one elbow and moved her head, looking around. There Yugo was dozing, sitting, leaning his back against a tree trunk. Next to him, in a sleeping bag, curled up in a ball, with his back to the fire, he was either asleep or not, but at least he wasn't boring his evil gaze into Karen. Suigetsu was dozing, lying with his back right on the ground, on the other side of the chaotically dancing orange tongues of flame. The gaze slid further, behind her back, and met the calm gaze of the endlessly black pools. She was not sleeping. She was sitting, her body slightly tilted, her elbows on her bent knees, the lower half of her face hidden under her clasped fingers. The corner of her lips involuntarily twitched to the side, as if reacting to an external stimulus that had touched unhealed wounds. All the worse, because they were not physical. Having made some effort over her body, which suddenly began to hum from the slightest strain, Sakura was still able to sit up. She felt slightly nauseous, and her dry throat insistently demanded water, so her gaze again, this time somewhat absent-mindedly, set off on its way, but suddenly came across an open flask held out by a hand in a white sleeve. Haruno looked askance at the Uchiha with distrust. "It's not poisoned." He laconically disabused her of her unspoken assumptions. Sighing, Sakura took the flask with slightly trembling fingers and brought it to her dry lips. The cool water immediately revived her throat and restored her voice, even slightly relieving the fatigue, headache and weakness. "Where are we?" she asked in a still slightly hoarse voice, a simple question without any hope of getting an answer. At noon from the Valley of Fulfillment, the same simple answer, which earlier would certainly have surprised her with its clarity and the absence of double, hidden meaning, uncertainty, but now did not cause any emotions. Which, for some reason, did not surprise her either. Either she was too tired, or something had really changed inside. She looked at the fire, still holding the flask. Yes, something had definitely changed, Sakura felt it, but she still didn't understand what exactly. In search of answers, her thoughts involuntarily ran back in time, rewinding events in reverse order, but still not finding the turning point. Although no. There was a moment. The very one when she was able to break the Uchiha's genjutsu, find him, the puppeteer, in that colorful and terrifyingly vividly drawn universe that he had placed in her consciousness. Clearly in an attempt to break her completely. Yes, definitely at that moment something fell into its proper place inside the kunoichi. Something changed, did not break, it strengthened. Exhaling loudly and inhaling again, somehow also strangely new, or maybe the air was just fresher because of the proximity of the mountains. Sakura took another sip and handed the flask back to the guy. At the moment of handing it over, their fingers accidentally and only for a moment touched, but both treated it calmly, not ignoring or emphasizing this fact. "Sleep, no one will carry you to the valley in their arms," said Uchiha, looking at the fire just like the girl. "I already guessed," she answered, but she clearly wasn't going to lie down and sleep yet. "And no one will give you time to sleep in the morning either," the guy continued. "You've become very verbose to yourself. Where did this irony in your voice come from? Has it started to turn into Karen? Or maybe, what's even funnier, into Sasuke himself?" You've started snapping a lot, Uchiha retorted calmly and, putting an end to the conversation, repeated. Sleep. Then shut up. Haruna waved her hand wearily, leaning back into the side and turning away from the guy, so she couldn't see the attentive, quickly thrown glance at her and the slightly trembling upward corners of her thin lips, hidden under the palms that were once again raised to her face. Rest was indeed necessary for the exhausted body. Fatigue clearly prevailed over the inopportunely raging thoughts, under the hubbub of which Sakura quickly fell into a deep, but habitually light sleep. There was only one annoying thing in all that had happened: she still continued to love that arrogant bastard Uchiha Sasuke. Someone said that when tempering a knife, the master puts his soul into it. Well, it is absolutely certain that heat treatment changes the internal structure of the blade, although the owner will only see the result of heat treatment when using it. Copyright ============= 6. Postscriptum ========= 6. Postscriptum The real one is not with them yet. A short note on a piece of paper. Is this Jiraiya's message? What he meant. So, Grandpa? Does that mean anything to you? Naruto was clearly nervous, and everyone else in the Hokage's office was showing clear signs of excitement. I don't understand. Fukasaku handed the piece of paper back to Uzumaki. Even if we take that into account, everything is still too confusing. Well, any other thoughts? Shikamaru was clearly upset by the toad's ambiguous answer, but tried not to show it. A negative result was also a result, of course, but it was still rather unpleasant to admit defeat. I have already told you everything I know about pain. It seems as if he is capable of returning from the other world if he dies. But this is only my assumption. Fighting him is very dangerous, especially with such fears in your soul. First, you need to unravel his secret, the head of the hermit toads answered in a slightly creaky voice. What about other sources of information? Autopsy and interrogation. The copyist looked at the Hokage. It seems like it will take some time, Tsunade replied. There was something more hidden behind the formal exchange of glances that was so common in a normal conversation, but no one present could have known it. No one except the two of them knew about Uchiha Sasuke's message. How much longer? Naruto's voice was full of discontent. I think at least a week, the woman answered with a sigh. The guy suddenly hunched over, dropping his head. So long? Don't despair, Uzumaki-kun. The girl from the warehouse tried to cheer him up out of place. So, what should we do next? Shikamaru asked the fifth. Shizune is supervising the autopsy. I think it will go faster that way. We really have no choice but to wait, she replied. I'll go and tell them to hurry up. Naruto turned sharply and headed towards the exit. Naruto! Don't you dare distract Shizune! Tsunade raised her voice, trying to bring the guy to his senses. Suddenly Uzumaki stopped and said without turning around, I'm going to avenge the perverted hermit. I don't have time to sit still. His voice was unusually serious and calm, which clearly spoke of his intentions. Naruto-chan, Fukasaku suddenly spoke. It is clear that the decoding result did not satisfy you. What are you getting at? The displeased Jinchuriki turned around sharply. Deciphered or not, you won't be able to defeat pain at your current level. The toad replied calmly. So come with me. I'll teach you the ancient arts of Mount Mebukuzin. If you're not afraid to learn like Jiraiya-chan. He added with a slight chuckle. Naruto looked at Fukasaku in surprise, his features smoothed out for a second, and then a few determined wrinkles appeared near his eyebrows. Then I can defeat pain? I don't know. The only thing I can say is that you won't be like you are now. Uzumaki remained silent, a little confused. Tsunade, do you mind? The head of the hermits looked at the woman. Of course not, the fifth answered and added, turning to the Jinchuriki, Naruto, work hard, in her voice flashed. A request? Or perhaps hope? Training in these arts is tougher than you could ever imagine. Fukasaku continued, more cheerfully but still warningly. Do you think you can handle it? The perverted hermit did it, didn't he? The guy's voice was full of determination. That means I can't give in to him. I agree. As long as Naruto doesn't know about Sasuke's message, Sakura still has a day to return to the village. 36 hours at most. If we really have to make an exchange, Naruto should be ready. Tsunade calculated worriedly to herself. The entire next day, the fifth Hokage of the Hidden Leaf was unusually absent-minded, could get angry over a trifle, or could ask her interlocutor about the same thing several times. The entire headquarters walked on tiptoe, spoke in whispers, and in front of the Hokage herself, they stood at attention and reported in a strained, cheerful voice. How could they know what was gnawing at the woman? How could they know that every moment, every second, she was not just waiting, she was hoping that the door to the office would swing open and in the doorway would appear not Shizune, not Shikamaru, not any of her subordinates, but only her second student. Joyful and anxious about the answers to the questions that were being decided in her absence, she would run up to the Hokage's desk and start impatiently asking for details, and then her green eyes would widen in amazement at the news that Uchiha Sasuke had tried to lure Naruto out, supposedly to exchange one of his former teammates for another. If Tsunade, of course, told her about this message, about this stupid and not at all funny joke. Sanin kept casting impatient glances at that very ill-fated and innocent door, getting upset over trifles, pacing the room, sorting through documents unnecessarily, and spent the whole night in her office, unsuccessfully trying to occupy her thoughts with work, to distract herself from the nerve-wracking wait. The next morning, at about the same time that Team Taka left the inn many kilometers from Konoha and began climbing toward the pass, the copy ninja appeared in the office of the Hokage, who had not slept that night. Tsunade didn't even try to distract herself with work anymore, but simply spun slightly in her chair, rhythmically drumming her nails on the tabletop. She glanced at Kakashi, then returned to her occupation, or rather lack thereof. Tsunade-sama, Hatake began after a somewhat tense, short silence. I know. The fifth cut him off harshly and angrily, but her features immediately smoothed out. The woman sighed tiredly and lowered her eyelids. I'm sorry, Kakashi. I'm not myself. The copy ninja remained silent. Adults do not need extra words to understand each other, and sometimes sympathy can be expressed simply by one's presence. Give her another half a day. Tsunade looked at the Jounin again. If Sakura does not show up by evening, we will call Naruto. Anyway, the exchange. She winced slightly at this word, is supposed to take place tomorrow, so there is nothing we can do. Okay. The copyist replied and immediately continued in a completely different voice, much more familiar to Team 7 in its even somewhat carefree tone. How's the autopsy going? Tsunade-bachan, what happened? Right in the middle of the Hokage's office something slammed and in a quickly vanished cloud of smoke appeared the agitated and more disheveled than ever Jinchuriki of the Ninetales with the head of the hermit toads on his shoulder. The fifth did not immediately tear herself away from contemplating the Konoha landscape outside the window, another occupation, or lack thereof, that she had finally managed to find for herself, and turned to Naruto, the concern and determination on whose face smoothly flowed into bewildered amazement at the fact that apparently there was no urgent need to run anywhere, and no urgent need to save anyone. And then abruptly changed to picturesque discontent. So, nothing, huh? Naruto said somewhat offendedly, glancing sideways at Kakashi-sensei, who was right there in the office, holding some small scroll in his hands. I'm afraid that's exactly what happened, the Jounin replied and handed the guy a dark pipe. Throwing a surprised glance at his sensei and then at the Hokage, Uzumaki took and unfolded the message. In 4 days, at the Valley of Fulfillment, I will exchange Haruno Sakura for Uzumaki Naruto. If he does not come, Haruno will die. If there is anyone else with him, Haruno will also die. Uchiha Sasuke. Where is Sakura-chan? Naruto looked at Tsunade with completely different eyes. The fifth one looked into them for quite a long time, as if she were seeing these amazingly clear, pure blue, deep eyes for the first time, and then answered briefly. We don't know. And before Naruto could say anything, she continued, sitting back down in her chair. She never returned from the mission. We're inclined to assume that she really is with the Uchiha. Naruto glanced at his mentor, who only nodded briefly and barely noticeably. When is the meeting? No matter how you look at it, the Hokage never ceased to be amazed at how the son of the fourth changed at the right moments. Not a single unnecessary question, not a shadow of doubt, not a thought of retreat or an easier path. his own, unique son of the Hidden Leaf Village. Naruto, do you understand what this message means? Tsunade leaned forward, placing her hands on the table and clasping the tips of her long fingers. The fifth knew that if she named the date, not a single word of hers would reach the consciousness of the young Jinchuriki. It means that Uchiha Sasuke wants to lure you into a trap, meaning he could very well join Akatsuki, which immediately elevates him to the rank of missing nin. I know, the guy answered calmly and unyieldingly. When is the meeting? Tomorrow, the copy's sister unexpectedly answered for Tsunade, who had not taken his eyes off his student until that moment. Okay, that means I still have time to practice. No need, Naruto-chan, Fukasaku said, jumping off Uzumaki's shoulder onto Tsunade's desk, then looking up at the Jinchuriki with his yellow, unblinking eyes. You're well prepared for this meeting. It's best for you to rest. The guy looked at the toad with some annoyance. Fukasaku-sama is right, Naruto. Kakashi supported the head of the hermits. Tomorrow you will need strength. Okay, he muttered, throwing his hands behind his head, but still somewhat displeased. Tsunade leaned back in her chair. Kakashi and Yamato will go to the meeting with you. I'm not going to follow Uchiha's lead and voluntarily hand over the Ninetales to Akatsuki. Who knows who he'll bring, she added, as if to herself. Take Sakura from him and return with the four of you. No matter what. The Valley of Fulfillment brought back memories. Not the happiest. Besides, almost nothing had changed here, as if time had frozen for this place, condemning it to eternal constancy, as if it had been cut out and separated from the rest of the world, bright and bitter, joyful and weeping. Changeable. Naruto, Kakashi and Yamato arrived no later than 10 in the morning first. Uchiha did not set an exact time, so they had no choice but to wait. Naruto immediately took perhaps the most advantageous position on the head of the first Hokage statue, which opened up a full panorama of the entire surrounding area, and apparently did not intend to move from it for a single step, remaining motionless so that he could collect natural energy. His mentors remained slightly behind, however, not at all trying to disguise their presence. Kakashi even took out the latest volume of the well-known series by Jiraiya and, as always, calmly immersed himself in reading. The sun crawled lazily and laboriously across the sky. The waterfall roared. The unruly wind jerkily ruffled hair, the edges of clothes, the pages of a book, carrying with it small young leaves that were unable to hold on to the branches. Plump, voluminous dark gray clouds, promising rain, crept majestically across the sky. Time passed. Waiting turned into real torture, a rattling ringing of tension in the ears, stretching the strings of nerves to a painful limit, and the unknown frightened not so much with its possible unexpectedness, as with unexpected possibilities, spurring on ill-considered, hasty decisions. But suddenly a figure appeared from the shadows of the trees on the other bank, followed by another, and a moment later 3 more. Each of the Konoha delegation was watching the approaching ones attentively, only with different feelings. Yamato with tenacious composure and readiness to instantly react to any action, Kakashi, looking up from the pages of the book very carefully, studying each figure of the approaching shinobi separately, assessing each one, Naruto. A determined wrinkle again lay between the guy's eyebrows, giving his face an unusually serious expression. The same determination was reflected in the yellow eyes of the Jinchuriki with horizontal pupils. The figures approaching became clearer and clearer. Sasuke walked ahead, as always calm, confident, like a living, breathing embodiment of threatening force, and right next to him, literally half a step behind, walked Sakura. Any emotions were difficult to read on the girl's face, not so much because she was indifferent to what was happening, like Yugo, or tried to be and seem indifferent, like Karen, but because her face really was emotionless. No, it was by no means a frozen mask, a clay, soulless likeness of itself, rather a blank sheet, a smooth surface of water capable of reflecting, but always keeping its secrets to itself. Karen, Suigetsu and Yugo stopped and remained on the shore, on the head of the second stone statue, and the boy and girl jumped down and walked on the water, while Naruto was already walking towards them. I think I made it clear that you were to come alone. The black pools collided with the bright amber, and the air around suddenly heated up to the limit, literally in reality, practically crackling with hundreds of tiny electrical discharges. Sakura, Naruto's gaze, however, did not take its eyes off Sasuke's face. Go to Kakashi-sensei. What are you going to do? There was no fear or trembling in her voice. Her voice was different, not like the one Naruto was used to hearing, so the Jinchuriki involuntarily glanced quickly at the medic. The exchange has taken place. You will come with me, Uchiha said harshly, returning Uzumaki's attention to himself. No, he replied. I'll go with you if you defeat me. If I win, you return to Konoha. The guy's voice was more than adamant. These are stupid conditions. There will be no others. The Uchiha gave the Jinchuriki a quick, appraising glance and smoothly moved into a fighting stance. Naruto, Haruno wanted to say that she could help him, and now she really could. Sakura, please go to Kakashi-sensei. There was something in the guy's voice that the girl, despite all her desire to help from somewhere, a natural confidence suddenly appeared that now she could compete with. Sasuke came out from behind the Uchiha, walked the distance of 3 steps separating the guys, the people dearest to her, went behind Naruto's back and could not help but turn around. The girl herself, perhaps, did not know what she was waiting for or what she was not waiting for. It was some kind of physical need to turn around and look into these endless pools from behind, which can and will protect you. She did not doubt Naruto for a second. And she did not doubt Sasuke for a second. Whatever the outcome of this duel, she would accept it. Uchiha glanced briefly at the medic's face when she turned around, and held it longer than he wanted. There was no plea in her eyes to stop, no fear for him or Naruto, no tears of despair. Her green eyes were pure and transparent, like mountain lakes, in their depths, however, concealing the slightest bit of bitterness. But she turned away and walked quickly to her own side of the forces. Something somewhere seemed to sting, just a little bit, to give it any significance, especially since now Sasuke had no time to sort things out with his soul, if he even had one. Pushing off first from the water, then from several stone ledges, Haruno landed on the stone platform between Kakashi and Yamato. Sakura, Hatake called her. The girl raised her head and her pupils suddenly widened in a moment of horror. The vision from the genjutsu suddenly overlapped with reality, which made her even involuntarily take a short and quick step to the side, as if she had been pushed. However, the mentor's Sharingan was hidden by a Hitai, and the unexpectedly tenacious and even somehow stinging gaze suddenly softened. Sorry, I had to check if you were under genjutsu, the copy sage smiled encouragingly under the mask. The girl nodded and turned around 180 degrees to see what was happening on the water. Sasuke and Naruto were still hesitating, frozen in combat stances opposite each other. Sakura, Kakashi called the girl again. She turned her head and looked at the sensei, but he was in no hurry to say anything, carefully studying the girl's eyes and gaze. The copyist couldn't help but notice that something had changed in his student. Just a little, barely perceptible, something that shone through literally in her every movement, in every turn of her head and flutter of her eyelashes, something very real, but so ephemeral that Hatake couldn't even find the words to express it. The most striking change, however, he noticed right away: her eyes. Previously so honest and sincere, the copyist could read them like an open book, but now their depth was clearly deceptive, like the depth of any body of crystal clear water. It seems that here it is, the bottom, very close. But no, it is out of reach, and it is unknown how deep one must dive to reach it or at least get closer to it. Kakashi grinned at his thoughts, after which he raised his gaze from Haruno, who was attentively awaiting his words, to the sky, to the unpleasantly swollen, darkened clouds, inhaled the fresh air, barely smelling of moisture, and as if he said to himself, "A storm is coming."